some things that, well, ready?
Okay.
This is an interview at the Amsterdam Public Library, Amsterdam, New York. It is the 25th of February, 2005, approximately 10 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Gabriel J. Vertucci, April 13th, 1924.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I just barely got out of the 9th grade, believe it or not.
Okay.
And I admit that I was real dumb.
Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I was working for Mohawk Mills. I was working down there as a queeler.
Now, what was that?
Making rugs,
Uh-huh.
weaving rugs, and I was queeling. That's filling up the machine with the yarn, keep it going for the weaver.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all $1.27 an hour. But that's where I started.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you remember where you heard about Pearl Harbor and when? Where were you and what was your reaction?
Yeah, I was down in Mohaskell Mills.
You working at the mill that day?
Yeah, when I heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, be honest with you, I at that time I wasn't the type of guy to fly the flag.
Mm-hmm.
Because I came from a poor family. I had 8 sisters and 3 brothers. My one brother was in the Marine Corps with me in 3 battles, and I had a sister in the service, and then two other brothers. So there was 5 of us in the service, and we were so damn poor that it didn't. I felt the country didn't do nothing for me. We starved in the wintertime, and I went through the Depression, and it was a rough way to live.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really start getting to really eat until I was 16, and my father was a real mean son of a gun. But what really made me change my mind is that one night I went to the movies here in the Rialto Theater, and at that time they had the main feature, they had a cartoon, and they had a newsreel, Fox Movie Tone News,
Mm-hmm.
and World News, and I seen they had a newsreel they put on, and the first one was the Marines making a practice landing on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was all right, but then they showed parts of Guadalcanal and Tarawa, and all those guys. You figure they're fighting almost hand to hand with the Japs. Well, that didn't mean much either, But what really got me is they showed a film of the Japanese invading China, and it was called The Rape of Nanking.
Oh, yes.
And they had that film on, and I've only seen it once after that. And it's what got me. I'm a guy that was a lover of kids ever since I was 8 years old. Well, in Tiananmen Square, it was all loaded with Japanese troops, a regular array of bayonets. They had their bayonets attached, the whole square was loaded with troops, and they opened up an opening, and they had a little Chinese boy, and 2 of these goddamn Japs took this little boy, and they threw him up in the air, and then the other guys got under him with their bayonets and let him drop on the bayonets like he was a pincushion. Well, I'm going to tell you that turned me upside down. I wanted right there to join the damn Marines to get over there. And so I didn't leave right away. When I did join, it was on it was the following day when I got out of the movie. The following day when I got out of the movie, I went up here in City Hall, was the Marine recruiting office. And I go in there, and the sergeant's in there, and I says, what do you want? I said, I want to join the Marine Corps. He says, you can't. He says, the quota's all filled. And I says, what do you mean the quota's all filled? And he was a sergeant. He didn't hurt me any, didn't bother me. I wasn't scared of him. I says, you can take one more. And he says, I'm telling you that the quota's filled. I says, okay. I says, then it's going to be the Marine Corps' loss and the Army's gain, because when I get out of here, I'm going into the Army. And when I went out the door, he figured I was one of these wise jerks, you know, and it'd make a good Marine. Well, he was right, because he called me back, and he says, there's another way you can get in the Marine Corps right away. And I says, what is it? And he says, you have to join as a regular. I says, what the hell is a regular? A regular is a 4-year hitch. I says, I'll take it. And so he turned around, he signed me up, and he says, no, it was December. It was the month of December.
What year was that?
1942. Okay. December 1942, and he says, I'll sign up, but he says, you know, being that it's going to be holidays for the month of December, he says, why don't you just, I'll sign you up, you stay home for the holidays, and the first of January, we'll ship you to Parris Island. Hey, that's fine. And that's the way it went. So I was shipped to Parris Island. Got down there, and oh, Jesus, I'm telling you, I didn't have no brain and a big mouth. And son of a gun, as soon as I got into Parris Island, you know, they tell you to take all your clothes off and go through the rigmarole of trying to get you through boot camp, and well, everything was going fine, you know, and then it got to a time where we had all our clothes and every damn thing else, and they were ready to put us into the barracks. So I knew I seen that there was 2 stall barracks, two double bunks, and I didn't want no top bunk, so I ran in there quick and got one on the bottom bunk, and pushed myself aside. The drill instructor come in after a while, and the barracks was getting full, and he says, how many bunks is empty? And you know, I was always told to keep your mouth shut, but I couldn't. And I says, every bunk that still has the mattress turned over. Holy crap. He come up to me and he says, who said that? I said, I did. He looked at me, he says, I don't think you and I are going to get along. And when he asked me my name, I says, Gabe Vertucci. What is your name? He says, and he screamed at me until I finally got down to Private Gabriel Vertucci, sir. But that was my problem. I had a big mouth and no brain. But it'd take too long if I went through the rest of it. So, but after I got out of boot camp,
How long were you at Parris Island?
3 months. I was there 3 months, and I thought he was going to really give me a hard time. Of course, he insults you when he knows that you back talk like that. You know, he insults the hell out of you. So anyway, we moved to New River, North Carolina, and we started to build the 4th Marine Division. There was only 3 divisions in the Marine Corps at that time. We started to build the 4th Marine Division. And I got into the E Company of 2nd Battalion, 25th Marines. And the guy that is a big part of my story is a Lieutenant Sizemore that was our platoon leader. And he was so obsessed with building a platoon that he wanted the best in the company. And so I didn't realize what a friend he was going to be until after a while. But I don't know why he picked me out of the platoon. He gave me a stripe. I was just 130 pounds soaking wet. And so I didn't think anything of it. And most of the other kids, a lot of them were mama's boys. I made friends with someone from the South. They were nice guys, but it looked like most of them were mama's boys. But, I come up the tough way, and so it made it easier for me. I knew what work was all about. So, as we were going along, building the 4th Marine Division, he started training us, and he always turned around and would take the platoon at night and, just have them shoot the breeze. Well, I wasn't in for that. I didn't have nothing to talk about. I came from a poor family. I didn't want to tell no damn stories like that. So I never went to his little parties. And after a while, I'm going to try to make it a little shorter because it's going to take too long. And it was time to get ready to go overseas. And to do that, we were going to go on, load onto a ship, the USS Monrovia, and go through the Panama Canal. So this one goddamn day, he turned around and put us aside and he told us, he says, "No, I'm going to tell you something." He says, "This training's going to be tough." And he says, "If any one of you guys want to make up your mind that you're going to go over the hill," he says, "you come to me first." Well, I know the guy, I don't know why he got to pick me and like me, because there was other guys that were educated, they were high school graduates, and there was 6-footers in the platoon, and so I let that go, and then it was going to be pretty close to, I knew that we were going to go to California. And when I see, every time you go to the movies and you see a newsreel of the Marines making a landing, you know damn well that it was all tough, close fighting. So I turn around, I says, "Holy crap," I come up with the idea that I was never going to get back home. So when I did join the Marine Corps, I never told anybody in my house that I joined. I didn't tell my mother, sisters, or brothers. I never told any of them. When I left New Year's Eve and when they heard from me, I was down in Parris Island, South Carolina. And but anyway, when I knew that we were going to California, there's no way of getting a leave. When I joined here in the city of Amsterdam at City Hall, and the sergeant said, "If you join for a 4-year hitch," he says, "you get a 30-day furlough every month," and this and that. So I believed the son of a gun. And so anyway, I knew that it was a lie. I couldn't get home. So I made up my mind on a weekend liberty, I was going to go over the hill. And I did. I went over the hill because I says, I got to see my mother. I don't believe I'm going to get home alive. And I went home, had hitchhiked to Raleigh, North Carolina, and from there grabbed a train, and it took time. And so came back to Amsterdam. I spent a few days, just with my mother mostly, and never said much about the Marine Corps or anything like that. And when I left, taking a train to Amsterdam and back, by the time I got back, I was 7 days over leave. I was 7 days over. As soon as I got back into the base, I don't know who they were, 2 Marines, they both grabbed me one arm at a time, and they threw me in a brig. And I am going to tell you, I was a guy that has close claustrophobia, and I said, "What the hell are you throwing me in the brig for?" And I was shaking on the bars. I said, "Get me the hell out of here." I've been through 4 battles in the Marine Corps, and I can tell you that I never was as scared on a battlefield as I was when I was thrown in a brig. Caged up like I just couldn't take it. I grabbed the bars and I was shaking the bars. I said, "You call Lieutenant Sizemore right away. You call him." And he did call Lieutenant Sizemore, and he told him, "Let that man out." And they let me out, and I came back, and we were getting ready to load to board ship, and we did. We went aboard ship, and we started going through the Panama Canal, and our company commander was a Don Ellis, that was a top-notch officer. Our battalion commander, Colonel Hudson, was a son of a gun that became my #1 enemy throughout the 4 years that I was in the Marine Corps. He was the guy that told Captain Ellis, he says, I want you to take the man that was over the hill the longest. And there was other ones. There was 7 or 8 other guys. And he says, you take the man that's over the longest, and he says, I want you to make an example out of him. And they did. They made an example out of me, all right. And they didn't read me off until we were going through the Panama Canal. And when Lieutenant Sizemore come back, and he found out he went on a leave, when he came back and had roll call early in the morning, he said, where's Private Vertucci? And they told him, oh, he went over the hill. And when he got me out of the brig, we went aboard the ship on the way through Panama Canal, and that's where they read me off. And I spent 4 years trying to find out if there was any other Marine in the Marine Corps that was ever given a summary court-martial for being just over leave 7 days. But when the lieutenant read me off, he called me aboard ship. I had to go down in the hole where our company was office were, and the headquarters, and he read me off. And he says, being over leave for 7 days, he says, you are more or less awarded a summary court-martial. You are fined $150. You're going to remove your stripe, and you're going to do 90 days of extra police duty. Well, I didn't care about any of the other ones. The only one that hurt was being fined $150. That was a hell of a lot of money then. And so we got to California. But after he got done reading me off, the lieutenant was so mad because it was me, and I don't know why he picked me, but he was so mad. He rolled up the court-martial, and he swung it, and he hit me right in the stomach with it. He says, give this to the first sergeant. So I did. We got to California, same damn thing. I turned around and I says, I'm going to pick out where I'm going to do my 90 days of police duty. So I picked the mess hall, never really dreaming that the cook was an habitual drunk. and I had to cover up for him a couple of times early in the morning. So I went in there and I was in my glory. I was helping the cook. I got up 4 o'clock in the morning making the coffee for 242 men. I had it right down pat after 2 days. 2 garbage pails full. Lieutenant Sizemore was the first one to compliment me. He said, Vertucci, that's a beautiful cup of coffee. But anyway, there's a couple of times I got up 4 o'clock in the morning, make the coffee. The cook was drunk, and there was nobody to feed him. Nobody to feed the company, and they're in line. So the best thing that I could do is run to our sister company, F Company, and tell the people there that there's no food for the company. And so he made me a couple of big tubs. I run up on top of the hill, run back down, and I'm feeding the goddamn company. But I was there, and I was supposed to be there 90 days, and I loved it. Everybody was going out training in the fields. I was here eating pretty good, and I joined the Lonely Hearts Club, and writing letters to different people, or you had these little brochures you pick up in the market, and but same thing. At night, he would build a bonfire, want everybody out there to join it, and I didn't join it. Well, we went overseas. But, there was other saying, if I keep going, I'll be here all day just talking about garbage, So anyway, we was ready to ship overseas. And we were the first division. The 4th Marine Division was the first and only division that ever left the United States combat loaded. When we got off that ship, we were invading the Marshall Islands.
Now, what do you mean by combat loaded?
Combat loaded, it means that you take everything with you. Mm-hmm. And everything, all your equipment and everything. When you get off that ship, you're hitting the Japanese islands. And
Now, had you ever trained with the landing craft or anything while you're in California?
no, never did. But never was on a landing craft.
Oh.
Never was on a landing craft. And what made it difficult was that when we made that landing, we were landing on alligators. It was a landing craft. And that is where I learned a lesson. Because I was a guy that, I didn't have a brain, but yet I had what everybody was born with. An everyday common horse sense. And some use it and others don't. And so that pulled me through. It pulled me through 4 battles. Because my brain never turned around and told me, don't do this, you're going to get killed, or whatever. It never entered my mind. But my everyday common horse sense. So we got aboard the alligators and we were making the landing. And at California, he gave me my strike back. And he made me what we call a demolition man. I was the guy that handled Bangalore torpedoes and satchel charges. I had a 3-man crew, and I was going in as a first wave. And with the Bangalore torpedoes, you use that to get rid of the barbed wire. So we land on this one little island. The 23rd and the 24th Regiments landed on Roy and Namur. They were the 2 islands that had the airfields. They were the important islands. And that's where all the fighting was. The little island that we landed on, believe it or not, there was only 1 Jap on it. Only 1 Jap. And I land on the beach and I says, holy crap, there was no fire or nothing. I stood up. I could see the ocean on the other side. And then all of a sudden, my company come in behind me. As soon as they hit that sand, this was the first time, and they thought they were in combat. That whole company, they opened up like it was a fireworks finale. They were firing at nothing. And finally I got up again and I says, holy hell, I got up. When I got up, it started to calm down. The Lieutenant Sizemore, he was behind. And when I got up, here comes a guy by the name of Sergeant Diorio. He turns around and he's running up and down the beach with all his fires going, and he's screaming. He says, every man for himself, every man for himself. I said, holy Christ, what kind of a Marine Corps is this? And that was the end of it. That was the end of it. So
Did they capture the one Japanese soldier?
the 1 Jap, somebody killed. Somebody killed the 1 Jap. And so it was my first time of ever looking at a dead Jap. And then during the first night, 1 Marine moved during the night and another Marine shot him. So it was uneven. We had 1 dead Marine, 1 dead Jap. And I don't know who the 2 guys were that I didn't know at all in the company. They weren't young kids. They were older guys. And they turned around, and I don't know if it's right to mention it or not, but they turned around, and those 2 guys went up to that dead chap. They took a knife out. They cut his penis off, and they put it in his mouth. And I said, Jesus Christ, that made me flip. So we ended up getting out of there, and they told us to go down the Kwajalein Atoll and start checking out these other islands. And I realized that we were in alligators, and you could put your hand over the side, and you're in water. And I said, if a wave hits this, we're going to sink. And so I made up my mind then, right then and there, that I was never going to carry a pack. So I got rid of my pack, had my poncho on back of my cartridge belt, and my canteens, my rifle, my bayonets, all. I wouldn't carry a pack. So we went down the atoll. We started hitting these little islands, and there was nothing. There was nothing on them. And the last one was the island of Kwajalein. That was the big island. And they thought the Japs were going to pull a counterattack on us and come down the chute and And so they put us on that island for reinforcements, to set up reinforcements. And in the meantime, the Army was coming in on the island with an anti-aircraft outfit, and I seen that an LST come in for the Army and unloaded a whole damn LST load of cases of food, and we're only supposed to be using K-ration. That's all we was going to be ending up with. So I took a bunch of the guys from the platoon. I says, let's go. They were just unloading it, and they were stacking it up. And we got over to that stack of food and crates, and I says, don't anybody take 2 cases of light. Everybody take a case of something that's different. And we all did. I grabbed what was a case of canned peaches. Canned peaches and canned pears was my favorite. So I grabbed a case of canned peaches. And we turned around, and it was only 7 of us, but we had 7 cases of food that we stole from the Army. And what they told us in the Marine Corps, which was funny, but yet it made sense, they said, when you're a Marine, if you want anything, you don't steal it. You just borrow it. So we borrowed those 7 cases, and we ran on the beach, and holy crap, one guy got a hold of, I don't know how the hell he did it, but he got a hold of a case of chickens. It was really chickens, with canned chickens in gallon cans. And there wasn't too many of them, I guess, because while we were setting up on the beach, digging our foxholes, one of the guys in the platoon was going to make an oven, and they were going to cook a chicken, and who the hell comes up the beach but an Army captain? And, you know, being I was from Italian extraction, you know, I took one look at that guy. He's come up and he screamed. He says, I want that Marine that stole my chickens. And I took one look at him. He looked like he come out of Hollywood. Had all kinds of gizmos on his uniform. I took one look at him and knew that he was Italian. So anyway, he says, where's your company commander? I says, he's down the beach. But the company commander was starting to walk up the beach, make sure we were digging our foxholes and putting up a little defense like we were supposed to. And he met the captain. And he says, I want your man that stole my chickens. The company commander, Don Ellis, says, we don't steal in the Marine Corps. So he blew it off. So we started to cook a chicken. We started opening up. All of a sudden, we got the word the colonel was coming up the line. We had to turn around and we had to give it to an Army outfit that was behind us setting up a gun. So we gave it to him. Here's the food. We can't take. So we lost every bit of it. Didn't stay on that thing very long, and when they pulled us out of there. We says, we're going back to Maui. We're going to get ready for the invasion of Saipan and Tinian. So we went back to Maui. And then I'm going to the battle now. It'll take too long if I don't. So we got to Saipan, and the first day we hit the beach, I wouldn't carry a pack. And we landed on the beach. It was the first wave, and our first objective was the high ground. And to get to the high ground, you had to go through an open field. You know, and you're on a ship for two weeks or more, and then you make a landing. You got sea legs. You know, you can't run. Your sea legs, you're moving in slow motion. And so I figured I wasn't going to get killed on the damn beach. So I'm just going to keep running. I went right through the dam, and I didn't have no pack. I dumped my pack right away. I knew we were never going to get a hot meal on the island. So I said, you don't need a mess hall, a mess gear. You don't need mess gear. You don't need clothes. You're not going to take a shower. You're never going to change your clothes. So I dumped my whole pack. And I fought in that whole damn battle. And even on Iwo Jima, I fought with no pack at all. If I want to move and a Jap jumps me, how are you going to fight him if you got a pack on your back? So this was all my own personal idea. And so I ran across the open field, and I was one of the first to get to the top of the high ground. And I got up on that high ground, and I looked down, and hell, that's when the artillery was falling, and then everybody just seemed to follow. Everybody just seemed to follow. We got to the high ground, and the lieutenant comes up behind me, and the first thing he said to me, he says, on the battlefield, you call anybody any name you want. You don't have to call them by their last name. You don't ever call them by their rank. You call them by the first name. So he says, Gabe, he says, I'm going to be in your foxhole tonight. And I says, fine. So we dug our foxholes. We had a nice line set up. And this was the first night. It got dark. Somewhere in the first hour of darkness, it seemed like the Japs sent out a couple of guys to check out our lines. And somebody was firing. I don't know who the hell was firing, but I wasn't, because I didn't see anything. And the following morning, I was so goddamn anxious to get at the Japs. I'm telling you, this is how nuts I was. I was really nuts, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. We always would jump off at 9 o'clock and attack the Japs at 9 o'clock. Here it was 10 to 9. I started out. I started going out alone. And I come down the field, and there was two Japs that they had hit during the night. One, I seen he looked dead. But the other one, I couldn't figure it out why they would come out to check our lines and have transport packs on. Why did they have all their material, I'm saying to myself. And when the other Jap heard me coming, he was facing where I was headed, back into Japanese territory. And he just raised up his head, and he did it slowly, and he turned, and he was looking right at me. And here the Lieutenant Sizemore behind me with the platoon, he yelled, Vertucci, finish him off. Well, I'm going to tell you, it didn't make any sense to me to kill a wounded man. I was anxious to kill. I wanted to kill a Jap, but I wanted him in one piece. And I didn't do it. And it was one of my first mistakes I ever made on a battlefield, because I insulted the lieutenant in front of the whole platoon by disobeying his orders. And it didn't make no sense. I just kept walking. I walked between the two Japs, and I kept going into Japanese territory, and I didn't look back. I never heard a shot, because didn't make any sense. Here it is, first thing in the morning, you got a wounded man, you let the burial detail come up and pick him up, or stretcher pick him up, and you could interrogate him, maybe get some information from him. It's the first day on the island. And but anyway, we kept moving. The lieutenant did not talk to me for 4 days, and he got to be a friend. You know, and he got to be a damn good friend. So we kept moving, and we kept moving. And every night he was in a foxhole with somebody else, and behind our platoon, where I had to pick up another kid to get in a foxhole with me. And we got to the fourth day, and I pulled another boner. We was ready to move at 9 o'clock in the morning, and here comes a string of Japanese civilians. All women and kids. There's only one man in it, and he was the one that was leading the people. And all he was carrying was a cane. Well, I'm going to tell you something. My whole company was lined right up. And we were stopped, because we had to wait for these civilians to get out. They were going to go back to the beach area where they were going to put them behind barbed wire. And I turned around and I ran right out. I seen that guy leading them with a stick. Behind him was his wife. She had a pack on her that she looked like a pregnant elephant. And I don't know what the hell made me. I didn't have no brain to work with, you know. And it was just common sense. I seen my mother till I was 16 years old, being abused by my father. I couldn't stand to see that Jap abuse that woman. And I ran right out. And I stopped him. I stopped the whole line. And I motioned to the lady, and I said, pointed to her bundle, I said, put it down. And for her to put it down, it was so damn big that she had to do it off the side of her back, or she would have broke her ankles. And she had two kids, one on each side, hanging onto her legs. And so she dropped the bundle. I pointed to the guy that was walking with a stick, and I said, get over here. He come over here. I said, give me that stick. But I don't know whether he could understand me or not, but it was all sign language. And he gave me the stick. I pointed to him. I said, pick up that bundle. And he did. He picked up that damn bundle, and I'm not realizing it, that the whole damn company's looking at me, and I didn't realize it. You know. So I took the woman, I gave her the stick, I said, you get up in the front. The guy put the goddamn bundle on his back, and I motioned for him to go. I turned around and I says, oh God, I says, I'm looking at the whole company, they're standing there, there's not one Marine that ever said a word, and there's not one Marine that ever laughed. So we got rid of the whole bunch of them, and then we moved in and started going into the Japanese territory. We was stopped again. That we were told that we're going to have to hold up, that the Army's coming over, Army Air Force is coming over, and they're going to drop 2 blockbuster bombs in front of our lines. Well, I didn't know what they were going to drop them on, you know, until they come over one at a time, and you could see the pilot. There were treetop level, 2,000-pound bombs, and they drop them, they bounce on the ground, bounce right back up, and then they explode. Well, the first one was fine. The second one, while we were waiting, a kid next to me was sitting on a stump, and he had his whole transport pack on, and he was just comfortable sitting on that stump because his pack was resting on the stump. And he was smoking a cigarette, and I was standing next to him. The second bomber come over, dropped that blockbuster, and it bounced up in the air and exploded. It was not as far away as the first one, and all of us comes a big piece of molten steel, a piece of the bomb. And it come right, it happened so fast, it couldn't yell. It came between me and that kid, and believe it or not, it cut that kid's throat. And he never moved. He never moved. And the first thing I yelled for a corpsman, and he didn't move, and I could see that it cut his throat. It didn't even take the cigarette out of his fingers. And I pushed the cigarette out of his fingers, and I called for a corpsman, and then we kept moving. So we got to the other side of the island, and that gave us a skirmish line from where we hit the beach to the other sea. We had a skirmish line for 5 miles. 2 Marine divisions, the 2nd, the 4th, and we had the Army division that was from here, from this area. The 27th Army Division was from here, and they were in the middle. So we got on the end of it, and we're on top of a beach, and on top of a cliff, and we looked down into the beach, and holy crap, a nice sandy beach that looked like a Daytona. Well, I'd never seen Daytona at that time, but I can describe it later. They looked just like Daytona. But on the beach, the base of the beach, there were concrete pillboxes all along it. All along that. And we're on top of the hill. So Lieutenant Sizemore's laying there, and another kid by the name of Rashino is laying next to him. And I said, holy crap, there ain't no action up here. I'm going to go down. There's a path cut through the woods about 5 feet wide. I'm going down to the beach. And I started running down, headed down to the beach, went around a corner, and who the hell was running up with the Lieutenant Taylor? He had already been down on the beach, and the Jap had cut one of our officers, a Lieutenant Lockwood, cut him right in half with a saber. He's seen those damn pillboxes. He dropped his carbine, and he was going to throw a grenade into the bunker. And a Jap come out to the back with a samurai sword, cut him right in half, right down to his belly button. And Lieutenant Taylor says, "Gabe, don't go down there." And so I didn't. I turned around, come back. We almost shot each other. As we were going around a corner, a guy's coming up, I'm going down. I almost take him for a jab. I just was on a hair of going to squeeze the trigger, which we didn't. So we got back up on the beach. And when I got back up on the beach, and I looked up next, I stand next to Lieutenant Sizemore, and here that Jap that had cut the lieutenant right up to the belly button was running up the beach. He's waving his samurai sword, waving. You could see blood on it, and it was a beauty. And I thought, oh, geez, deep down, I'd love to get that son of a gun. So the lieutenant was firing at him with his carbine, and he wasn't hitting him. And I never fired my rifle from the shoulder. I always fired from a hip. So I squeezed off a couple of rounds when he was running, and I knocked him over. And then I looked at the lieutenant because he didn't talk to me, and this was the 5th day. He wouldn't talk to me. Mm-hmm. So I says, "Jim," I says, "if I were you, I'd throw that carbine away and pick up an M1. Damn it, if he didn't do that. He did that. And then we were moving. So instead of trying to figure out, instead of telling every goddamn day about what every day, but one day about 2 weeks later, we were going through an open field, and I kept asking the lieutenant. He got to be friends after that. He knew that I could kill, and so he became stuck with me every night in the foxhole. And I said, "Where the hell's the tanks? Why aren't the tanks going across these open fields in front of us?" But they always kept them in the back. He says, "I guess the colonel feels that if you lose a tank, they can't replace it, but they can replace Marines." And that was his logo, So we got into this damn open field, and the Japs pinned us down. And I'm not kidding you. This is the first time I really got scared, and I never got scared again. I got scared right there, and then I says, "Holy crap, I'm going to get killed right away, and I'm not doing any fighting myself." And so I started to pray, and I'm not ashamed to tell what prayer I said. I says, "Lord," I says, "please," I says, "just give me 20 years. Just give me 20 years of life." And I did, and that's just the way I prayed. And we got out of it. Man, oh man, it came to another goddamn, our third week, and we was pushing the Japs, kept pushing the Japs, and came to the 3rd week. The whole company was moving pretty fast. The colonel was pushing us, and I came across a Japanese dump, a supply dump. They were carrying this material with them every time they moved. They were taking it back to the hills. Finally, they made up their minds that it wasn't worth carrying, I guess, so they left it. I looked at it. My dungarees were dirty. I was filthy. And I couldn't stand to be filthy. I was known for being a guy that was a maniac for being clean. And so I'd see these Japanese uniforms, so help me. I see these Japanese uniforms, brand new bundles, nice clean shirt, nice clean pants, brand new. And so I was with a kid whose brother followed us on every one of our reunions after. And he was with me. And the company was moving, and I went through all these damn supplies. So I took a nice set out. I took off my dungarees, dirty dungarees. I put on a Jack uniform. No man in his right mind would ever do that, but I didn't have a right mind. And Fitch did the same thing. The two of us. We put our Japanese uniform on, and their trousers only just covers the knee, and you got your bare legs. And so then we had to run and catch up to the company. While we was in a run, I look up and I see Lieutenant Sizemore standing by himself. The company was still moving, and he was waiting for me to catch up to him. And he did it in a nonchalant way. He turned around and he says, "Gabe, He says, I would feel a hell of a lot better if you would take that uniform off. And he said it so nice that I couldn't refuse him, and I didn't want to refuse him. So I ran all the way back. I put my dirty dungarees back on, left the Japanese uniform, and we moved up to our first hill. We had to take this damn hill. And we moved up the hill, and halfway, and there was no fire, nothing, no fire. And so we got halfway up, and the rest of the platoon, they were going to take a shortcut. They cut across the hill. They weren't going to go to the top. And I said to them, well, nobody going up to the top? Like a damn fool. I says, I'll go. Went up there, I had to climb ridges. There was ridges on every one of these hills on the top, and paths always leading up to them, on every one of those hills on Saipan. So we got up to the top, and I look, and there's a clearing, and off to the left, there's a hell of a cave that you could drive a truck in the opening. And when I got on the top of that, the Japanese sun was coming up, and it was a hell of a view. Big round sun, you could almost feel like you could walk over to it with the rays sticking out, the identical Japanese logo, the sun with the rays. I looked over to the left, and it was all jungle growth on the left side, and I had to cross the opening. So I walked across the opening like I owned it, and I went on the other side of the opening, and I looked in. And I swear that I thought that there was a red carpet on the floor. And I was up there on the top alone, and I just couldn't believe it. When I seen it, it looked like a red carpet. I walked right into the goddamn cave, pardon my language, and I was a shocked boy. Laying on top of the floor of that cave, there was, I figured, roughly about 25 people, kids and women, no men, kids and women, and every one of them had their throats cut. And while I was standing there flabbergasted, I seen a motion off to the side of my eyes, and I see a motion, and I quick went down on one knee to make a smaller target, and it was a baby crawling, a little Japanese baby crawling. It couldn't walk, but it was just crawling, and it seen a motion, and I was the motion, so it started coming through me, and it crawled right through between these people, right through the blood, that little baby. And then I walked, I got up and I walked right into it, and with my left hand, I picked up the baby. It had a nightshirt on, and it was just straps, and I picked it up like a back, like you would pick up a bunny rabbit. I picked up the baby and held it all bloody, and I turned and got out of there, and I got over to where I came up the ridges, and I yelled down. I says, I need some help, because there was no way I could get down with the baby in one hand, my rifle in the other. So a couple guys come up. I says, you're going to have to relay this baby. So I handed the baby down, and I says, relay it to another guy, and they relayed it all the way down. And that's how we got rid of the baby. And then we had to go to the second hill. We went to the second hill, and I'll be son of a gun. Lieutenant Sizemore, he turned around and he followed us. We went up to that second hill, and there was nothing. We got on the top, there was nothing. And all of a sudden, I looked off over the other side of the hill, and there, I've seen it was all jungle growth on the side of the hill with rocks, and I seen a motion. And just for the hell of it, I was a hand grenade man. I believed in hand grenades, and I was carrying 6 that day. So I turned around, I took a hand grenade off of my belt. I had 2 in my dungaree pockets, both dungaree pockets, and when I took that uniform on, I had to find a hell of a place to put the goddamn the hand grenade. So I threw a hand grenade where I thought the movement was. And holy crap, Japs come out and started running in all directions. They were running in all directions. I threw the first hand grenade. Then I threw the second one, and they were running back. I used my whole 6 hand grenades on that side of the hill, and believe it or not, Lieutenant Sizemore was standing next to me and never fired a shot. And then when I got done with the hand grenades, I was firing from the hip. I never took my rifle and fired from the shoulder because I couldn't stand it next to my ear when it went off. And I trained myself on the island of Maui to fire my rifle from the hip. And all of a sudden, the rest of the company, the 2 other platoons that were down in the open field, they weren't doing nothing. It was just our platoon, and that's the way the Marine fights. You turn around, get in the skirmish line, whatever in front of you, you take. And these other guys, they won't come over and help unless you ask them to help, unless you need to help. But you take it, and then after you take it, then you keep going. So the lieutenant turns, or the company commander, Captain Ellis, he started screaming. He had one of his boys yell up to us to get off the hill. And I yelled down with my big mouth. I says, why get off the hill? I says, we're killing Japs up here. And that was the end of it. Only a few minutes later, the captain calls himself. He yelled up, he says, I want you troopers to get off of that hill now. And Lieutenant was getting nervous. Lieutenant Sizemore was getting nervous. And he says, let the rear echelon troops mop up the hill. Get off of it. Before he said that, the first thing he said, which I forgot, was that he wanted prisoners. And I was so damn mad to see those kids and those women with their throat cut. I says, we ain't taking no prisoners today. And that was me. I said, we're not taking no prisoners today. And then he started yelling to get off the hill. So that was the way that worked. Lieutenant Sizemore says, Gabe, we better go. So I got off the ledge, and it was all ledges going down the side, a path leading right down to where they were in the open field. And just as I started going down I got off the ledges, started going down that path, there was another path that swung around to the left of the hill. And it was only a narrow one. It's only about 2 feet wide. And I says, I got to see what the hell's on that. I got on that path, and I started to walk. I only walked 8 feet, and I seen a black sneaker. And the lieutenant, he turned around and he waited. He wouldn't come off the ledge until I got back onto the path. I seen that sneaker, and I looked up at him. I said, Jim, you got any grenades? And he says, he didn't say a word. He just took a grenade off his belt, and he threw it to me. I pulled the pin on that grenade, and I walked over to that path. I couldn't throw it because it was so damn narrow, and it was going around the corner where I seen that sneaker. So I rolled it like you'd roll a bowling ball. I rolled the grenade over to the sneaker, and then I come back, and I put my back around the back of the rock. It was a mammoth rock, and I put my back up against it, and I'm waiting. I swear, it took like a goddamn minute for that hand grenade to go off. But it didn't. It just takes generally 6 seconds, but that one took a little longer. After the hand grenade went off, I jumped on the path, and I ran over. Sure as hell, there I seen the black sneaker. There was 2 Japs waiting for me. They were right in a little crevice of that mammoth rock that was made up the hill. And the first one, he had a bayonet over the top of his head, waiting for me to come around the corner. The other one was right in his back. It was right in his back, and my hand grenade must have shocked both of them. So I took my rifle, and I didn't aim. I just pulled my rifle out and held it like that, and I shot them both in the head, one round in each side of their head, and not either one of them fell. They didn't fall. The bayonet did not come out of his hand. And I says, I better get out of here. And I got up back, and I walked back on the path, and then the lieutenant come down and started coming down the path. I says, Jim, I says, the captain's mad. I says, you go first. And I followed him. I followed him down. And I'm telling you, this was unreal. This was unreal. He never fired a shot. We got down to the open field. The captain was standing there. We was about 10 feet from him. And he looked at Lieutenant Sizemore and he says, Jim, he says, that is a job well done. And the lieutenant never fired a shot. He could never give an order. I was with him through the whole damn battle. When we moved, he moved because he was alongside of me. He was just that type of a guy. He was so scared and petrified that he couldn't function. And then after a while, the guys knew that I was leading the platoon. He wasn't. But I was just covering up, and that's the way it worked. So the lieutenant, or the captain rather, was on the field phone. And the colonel was on the phone with him. And the colonel says to him, he says, Captain Ellis, he says, I want that next hill before nightfall. And I never heard of an officer begging another officer. But Captain Ellis begged that colonel over the radio. He says, Colonel Hudson, he says, please. He says, don't let me send my men over another hill. They're beat. And we went all day. Our supplies didn't come up. We went all damn day. And he says, don't let me send those men over another hill. He says, I want that hill before nightfall. And when he complimented the lieutenant, that turned around and put a spark in him. I wished he had never done it, but he put a spark into him. And so the captain says, well, we got to go and get the next hill. So the lieutenant says, Gabe, come on. We called the platoon. We had called the platoon down, and the lieutenant, we got over to the next hill. They were right in a row like humps on a camel. And he said to me, he said, come on, Gabe, we're going up that back of that hill. It was all jungle growth. It was vines and everything else. He told the platoon, he said, you guys lay here. Stay here in the valley. And we had to get on our knees to climb under the damn vines. It was so thick. And I had taken a saber and a pistol off of a Jap that part of the morning. The one I killed, I took the saber and I stripped him. I took his wallet. Every one of them carry a postcard in their back pocket like Americans do. They have a girlfriend. They carry a picture of their wife or their girlfriend in their best kimono. It's a picture on one side and all the messages on the back. Well, I was saving them. And so I had those. I had an empty pack that I took just to put souvenirs in because we were going to get to the end of the island, and if I didn't get any souvenirs, I says it would be my fault. So that's all I wanted the pack for, was carry the souvenirs. So I had the saber tied to the pack. I had the pistol in it in a hard case was inside. I had the wallet and things that I pulled out of his pocket, the picture, put them in a goddamn, and that's what I had on my back. Didn't carry any weight. And so we got down on our knees and had to climb up the hill. We were climbing up under all this goddamn heavy growth. The lieutenant was ahead of me, climbing on our belly. Every once in a while, the vines would get stuck behind the saber that I had sticking up, and I had to back up and go down tighter. Well, we climbed up that hill, just climbing up on our bellies. We got to the top, and the lieutenant got up to the top first before me, and he let out a scream. He says, Gabe, get up here with your M1. Get up here with your M1. I was still on my belly yet. And by the time I got up, he ran off. There was the whole top of the hill was a clearing. He ran off to the right, and I get out, and I said, what the hell is he screaming about? I got out in a damn opening, and over to the left, standing on the edge of the jungle, was a Jap, bare from the waist down, with his hands up. And I made up my mind I wasn't going to take no prisoners that day. But the way he was standing there with his hands up, I turned like a dumb fool. I walked out into the opening. I walked right up to him, and just a few feet away from him. I motioned him to come out, and I knew what he was. I had the common sense to know that if he took his shirt off, he had to be an officer, because he didn't want us to read the rank. They wore the rank on their collar. So he come out. The second one come out. The third one come out. The fourth one come out. There was 8 of them. And I said, holy hell. The 8 of them came out, and I started talking to them, and I says, is there any more Japs down the other side of the hill? Lieutenant's staying over there by himself with his carbine, and the officer was shaking his head no. But the 8th guy was a kid, and he's shaking his head yes. So I took the guys and I said, move, get over there. I said, move, and get over on the other side. Meantime, I yelled to the lieutenant, call the platoon to come up and take these guys. And I grabbed that little kid, and I made up my mind I was going to go down the other side of the hill with the kid. And then before we got off the ridges, I changed my mind. And
let me stop you right here.
Okay.
We got to change tapes.
So you finish your, well,
Okay, we're rolling.
you captured the Japanese and then you left from there?
Yeah, and then, so I made up my mind that I wasn't going to take that kid down with me. And I pushed the kid to tell him to join the other 7, and left him there. And I started to go down the other side of the hill, and the lieutenant screamed. He was petrified that I was going to leave him up there with 8 Japs. And I never turned around. He just yelled. He says, Gabe, no! Gabe, no! I jumped off the ledge anyway. And son of a gun, and there was a path like every other hill. And I was going down that path. And I had my rifle at my waist, and I was looking at the left, and there was all kinds of rock that looked like ancient rocks. They were setting by themselves. Like they were set there like a crane. A crane put them there. And there was space all the way around them. So I'm looking to see if there's any Japs going to pop out. If a Jap was there, they had me dead. I was out in the open. I was stupid to do it. It was one of the most stupid things I ever did in the Marine Corps. And I just kept walking slow. And I was walking down that path, and I traversing my head and looking like that. When I was looking straight ahead of me, a baby cried on my right. And when I turned my head there, behind a shelter, and I didn't notice it was a shelter, was a Japanese Imperial Marine. He was behind the corner of the shelter. He turned around, and I looked into his eyes, point blank when he fired, point blank at my head. He put the bullet right through the back of my helmet, and I didn't know it. You don't hear it. You don't hear it going through the metal. He put the bullet through the back of my helmet. It went through the hair in the back of my head. The muzzle blast from his rifle burnt the back of my neck. And I just, lucky that I trained myself to fire from the hip, because it happened so fast that when he realized that he did not knock me down with the first shot, that he pulled the bolt back, put a fresh round in the chamber, and all he had to do was squeeze that trigger to get the second shot at me when I squeezed off 2 rounds, and I knew I hit him right in the heart. Because when you hit a man in the heart, no matter who it is, man, woman, they're going to go into orbit. And he did. That Jap turned around and he flew right up off the ground, and he spiraled and completely turned around. The rifle flew out of his hand and flew off to the left, and he went down, and he was laying on his face and his belly when he stopped. And right at the right side of his head was the opening to the shelter that was on the right side of that hill that blended right in the hill, and I walked past it and didn't even know it. I didn't even know it was there. And then so while I fired my 2 shots, I went down on one knee. I always went down on a knee, went down on my right knee. And I'm not kidding you. And my brain didn't tell me I was scared, but my left leg was shaking so bad that I tried to stop it, and I couldn't stop my left leg from shaking. It was shaking that much. And then all of a sudden, while I was doing this, the platoon come up, they took the prisoners, and Lieutenant jumped off the ledge, and that's as far as he got. And he told me later, he says, I seen that rifle coming past that built up, just like a bunker that they had there. It was just a shelter.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a shelter, made all with palm leaves and everything else. And when I was on one knee, I could see under the eave that the roof was made with galvanized metal. It had galvanized metal sheets on the roof, and covered with palm leaves, and they couldn't camouflage underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
So the lieutenant yelled. He says, "Gabe," he says, "Are you hit?" He says, "Are you hit?" I says, "Jim," I says, "I don't know. I was afraid to take my hand off of my rifle, off the trigger, and feel if it was blood, because my neck was burning." And so I give him a yell back. I says, "Jim," I says, "put two guys over the top of the hill and throw that shelter off. Take the roof off of that shelter so that I could see what's in it from the side." And he did. He sent two of the slowest guys in our platoon. One was a guy that was so filthy in California, in our tent camp. We was up in Las Palmas Canyon, and they couldn't stand him anymore, and they were going to give him a GI bath with a brush. And that brush, I'm telling you, put that over your skin. You're going to end up like a lobster. So his name was Sykes, and I felt sorry for him, but he was in my platoon. And the other one was a guy by the name of Baxter, and they called him Blackie. He was almost black with his skin, you know. And those two guys, I was waiting for them to throw the shelter off. And while I was waiting, I don't know what the hell made me do it, but we were told in boot camp that if you ever knock a man down on a battlefield, you make sure he stays down. So I knew I killed him, and yet something told me, "Gabe, you better put a bullet in the side of his head." And I'm on my one knee, and the only way I could do that was put my rifle around like that to get him in the side of the head, and I was good at it. That's the way I trained myself. I put a bullet in the side of his head, and the whole top of his head come right off, from his ears up. The whole top of his head come off, the hair is on the ground, and I had never seen a human brain before, and the brain was in the top of the head. It's just like the brain was sitting in a bowl. And that's the way I left it. And God had to be with me, because there had to be an angel on my shoulder. Because if I didn't fire that round, that third round, it would have hurt me later. But anyway, the lieutenant then came down, and he came down just before those two guys pushed the top of the roof off of that shelter. And he got over to the side there, and he stood on the side. And then a guy by the name of Giordano come down, was a top-notch Marine. He came down, and my other friend, Big John McGlue, was a guy that never got enough to eat, about 250 pounds. He was another top-notch friend. And there was also Paul Swartz, that was a BAR man. And they came down, and so this Giordano, he was a guy that always, he's the best. If a girl ever took that kid home to his mama, they couldn't find anything wrong with him. He had a smile worth $1 million. He was a top-notch kid, but yet he was so damn jealous of me. It was unbelievable, because he would always say, now just the first thing he said, "Gabe," he says, "you're always in the right place in the right time." And he used to get me mad, and I says, "There ain't no such thing as a right place and a right time." And so he looked at the Jap when he come around the corner, looked at the Jap with half a head, and he says, "Boy," he said this way, he said, "Jesus, Gabe," he says, "you really equalized him." And I didn't know what the hell equalized meant. but anyway, they pushed the roof off of that shelter, and when you do something like that in the Marine Corps, like I was stupid enough to do it, I had to turn around and finish what I was stupid to do, because nobody else would take over. And they made me finish it. So I walked over to the side opening, and I looked in. There was a beautiful square door opening. Whoever built it was precise. And I'd never seen an Imperial Marine before. And so I looked inside of it. There was the prettiest two girls standing that I'd ever seen in my life. And they were both they both had their dress up. The one on my left with her right hand, she was holding up her dress right up to the top of her thigh. And the other one, they had an arm around each other. The other one with her left hand, she was holding up her dress right up to the top of her thigh. And right then and there, I couldn't understand it, and I still can't understand it now, of how both those girls were wounded with shrapnel wounds inside their thigh, from their knee right up to the top of their thigh. They had the wounds on the inside. That one on her right leg and the other one on her left leg. I said, how the hell could it happen? How could it happen? I couldn't figure it out. But then I turned around and motioned for them to come out. And both of them, the gangrene had set in. Both of the wounds, they had them so damn long that gangrene had set in. And so I motioned for him to come out, and if I had a brain, and could think, I would have asked somebody to give him a shot of morphine, but I didn't do that. They came out, and they had to step over the Jap with a half a head, and one of them, it was her husband. One of them was married to the guy. And they come out of the shelter, and I motioned for them to go down, and they couldn't walk. They had to hobble. And they had to be in hell of a torture. And so, after they came out, two elderly women came out, each one of them with a kid in her arms. One had a baby in her arms that screamed, and that was the baby that I wanted. I wanted that baby because it saved my life. And the other woman, she had her hand on the prettiest little Japanese girl that I'd ever seen in my life. It had to be about 6 years old. The hair growing down her back. The prettiest thing, and what made them look so pretty is that they had their slanty eyes. And I had never seen them before that close, So the two women come out. I took the baby. I showed her my rifle. I took the baby, and then I put my hand out for the other little girl, and she grabbed my hand like I was her long-lost friend, and I motioned for the women to follow the two girls down. In behind them was another Japanese Imperial Marine that was a coward, but yet he was smart. He was the smart one. The guy that I shot was the wrong. Well, he was the stupid one, like I was, because if he had killed me, the lieutenant would have had that shelter blown to hell. And just before I had those people coming out of the shelter, the lieutenant turns around in front of Giordano, McGlue, and Swartz. He said to me, he says, Gabe, and right in front of these guys, he says, Gabe, he says, I don't know what I would do if he had killed you. And that's a compliment that you can't get anywhere else. But when he threw that compliment at me, it made me feel like I was on cloud 19. And so I motioned for the other Jap to come out, and I yelled to somebody grab him and take him to the rear of the lines. But what I should have said was, make sure that you get these civilians in the back line with these two women with their gangrene legs, But I didn't. It was a mistake that I made, and I didn't do it. And so they were going down a path and behind these two girls that were hobbling. And we got down to the bottom. The rest of the company was in the open field. Captain Allison, all of them were in the open field. And Captain Ellis turns around and give Lieutenant Sizemore another compliment, job well done and all. And I wish the hell he didn't do it, but they disappeared. and I'm on my knees with the little girl. I'm telling you, they're the first two kids that I seen in over a couple years, and kids were my weakness. So I put an arm around the little girl, but at first, before I did that, I picked up I had that little baby in my arms, and I turned around, and the exact word I used, I picked up that baby, and I looked at him, and I said, "You little pisser," I said, "You saved my life." And then one of the grandmothers, there was two grandmothers, there was the mothers of the two girls, and they put their arm out for the baby, and I gave it to her. I had to get rid of the baby. I gave the baby to her, but I took another couple of extra minutes with the little girl. I was on my knees, and she was up against my knee, and I had an arm around her, the prettiest little thing I'd ever seen. And then I finally knew that I had to push her over to the other lady, because when I looked around for the lieutenant was down the end of the field in Japanese territory up against the hedgerow. And I says, holy to myself, what the hell is he doing there? So I gave the little kid to the other woman, and I got up and I ran quick over to Lieutenant Sizemore, was over there by himself, up next to the hedgerow, and the hedgerow was in Japanese territory. And we didn't know it at the time, that we had pushed all the Japs into a peninsula, and the hedgerow was on top of the peninsula. You know, I get over to him, and he turns around, and the Jeep comes up with our supplies, and he pulls about 10, 15 feet from the hedgerow, and parks the Jeep with a little trailer behind it with our supplies on it, our food. We hadn't eaten all day, and the lieutenant says, "Gabe," the guy come up with a field phone. He says, "Grab the field phone." He says, "Tie in with the company CP that we're setting up our line." He didn't have to do that. That was stupidity. He didn't have to do it at all. We never did it any night. It was ridiculous. If we were going to get hit, they would hear it. So anyway, I grabbed the phone, and I took my pack off. I put it down, saber and everything, put it down, had my rifle on top of my saber, in the pack, and all of a sudden, out of the goddamn hedgerow, and it was getting late, out of the hedgerow, a Jap yells, "Banzai, Banzai, Marines, tonight you die!" And he threw the hand grenade. Goddamn hand grenade, and it was just getting dust, where a hand grenade from the Japs, when they would throw it, it would leave a string of sparks like you're throwing a firecracker. Our hand grenades don't do that. They just fizzle, but you can't see them if you threw them at night. But I could see the sparks coming, and the hand grenade was going to land right between me and the lieutenant. The lieutenant turned around. I didn't see him do it. He picked up my rifle. And he ran off to the right, and he laid down to the right. And I followed him. I had to get up to run. And by the time I got over to him, the hand grenade went off. A hunk of it, it's in my arm. It's in my arm yet. It got into my elbow. I never felt it. I never felt that piece of hand grenade hitting me. And when you have a Jap scare you with a banzai, you know. So I ran over and I laid down alongside the lieutenant, and I wished all these years that I'd been alive, I wished I had taken the damn telephone and given a throw, and I didn't do it. It's because you don't, in a moment like that, you don't think. So, lieutenant's laying there, he's on his elbows, and he asked for the telephone, and I gave it to him. I said, "Jim," I said, "let's get out of here." He was on the goddamn telephone. And I noticed that he had my rifle. And I'm naked. I have nothing. I have no bayonet. I had nothing. And all of a sudden, he was just ready to start talking when his face went into the dirt. And his elbows just stayed that, and his face just went right down into the dirt, right into the dirt. And the two Japs at the meantime was coming towards me. And I picked up the rifle, picked up my rifle. I had used three rounds, and what I forgot to tell you, when I went to put the third round in that Jap's head, I put the rifle out. I squeezed the trigger, nothing happened. There was a ruptured cartridge in it. And then I had to eject the cartridge, throw the fourth one in, and then I put the fourth bullet in the side of his head, which blew the top of his head off. So I had 4 rounds in that rifle left. And when 2 Japs come after me, one of them stopped and kneeled down, and he's pointing because it's starting to get dark, and he's pointing. So I picked up my rifle and I fired from the hip. I hit the one standing with 2 rounds, knocked him over. I fired 2 rounds into the second one, and he had knocked him over, and he started crawling back into the hedgerow. And then when I turned around to go back, it was pitch dark, and I mean pitch dark. I couldn't even see the hand in front of my face. That's how long we went that day, and it was all the colonel's fault, that bastard. And even the company commander agreed later. But anyway, so I'm standing there, and for a minute I says, I'm going to run back, and everybody else ran in the middle of the field and set up a line in the middle of the field, or just automatically. Machine gun on our right flank, they set that up. They had a mortar, and our left flank machine gun, the Japs took that over, and the rest of the company, they took that over, and they were going to use the machine gun and fire at the other one when we started. But it was all pitch dark, and I said, what the hell am I going to do? And all of a sudden, what came to my mind was to scream, and I yelled. I said, Vertucci coming back, Vertucci coming back. And I started running. I didn't know where the hell I was running, but I put myself in where I knew that I was going to be hitting those guys in the middle of the field. And I was running through the dark. And boy, when I was just ready to fall over Big John McGlue, the mortar platoon set up the machine gun and sent up a flare and lit up the whole damn field. And there I am, almost on top of Big John McGlue. And I went around the side of him. I had an empty rifle, and I had nothing, no cartridge belt, no ammunition. But while I was out there, somebody called for artillery fire, and my brother was in the 14th Artillery Battalion, called him for artillery fire. They fired 1 round per gun, and it landed right in the middle of the company, just after they laid down in the middle of the open field. Right in the middle of the company, including me, we had 30 casualties that night. 27 of them from our own fire, and the 3 was from Japs. 1 with me with the shrapnel in my arm. The lieutenant was killed right there, and I didn't know it, and I was hoping he wasn't. And Fitch, the guy that had the Japanese uniform on, I don't know why the lieutenant never got to him to tell him to take it off. He was running back, and someone shot him. And he was, then right after that, his brother followed us everywhere we went on reunions, and his brother was minister. And so anyway, I yelled right in daylight. I'm kneeling right in the open field. I'm yelling. I says, anybody got any extra ammo? And a big 6-foot guy by the name of Wells comes over. He turns around and he says, I got a cartridge belt. I says, what do I do? He says, do I give you my cartridge belt or do you give me your rifle? And I says, there ain't no way in hell I'm going to give him my rifle. Because he was a guy that always stayed behind the lines. And he did. He gave me his cartridge belt. I laid it down. I put it around me. I was a little pipsqueak. He was a 6-footer. I went to buckle it on me, and it went right down to my ankles. So I took all the damn cartridge, the clips of cartridges out of the cartridge belt, put them in my dungaree pockets, and that's when I knew that I was hitting the elbow, because I took one clip and I started to push it down into the rifle, and I realized that I couldn't hold the rifle and push that cartridge down in, that clip. So I put the goddamn, I put the rifle over my arm and I tried to hug it like that and then push the 8-round clip down into my M1. And just about that time, I looked over to the Jeep that was left out there, the driver took off and left it. And I noticed that a Jap had crawled under the Jeep. And at the same time, there was one of the elderly women was walking on all fours. And she was crawling over to the Jeep. I set them a glue when I found out I only had one arm. I didn't know whether to use up my 8 rounds or not. The Japs all come out of the hedgerow. They just swarmed out of the hedgerow. And I said, McGlue, I says, there's a Jap under the Jeep, and he's firing under the Jeep. And he knew, because he was right next to me. He seen that woman crawl under that Jeep. And I said, why don't you take him out? He had a BAR. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. And that is one bad thing, and I'm telling you, I couldn't help it. I lived with it all my life. And so I used my left arm as a log, and I put my rifle right on my left arm, and I put it under that Jeep and squeezed off 2 and 3 rounds, and that was it. And I never told myself I killed that woman. I never told myself I didn't kill her. But I knew that the Japs stopped firing. And McGlue was always a guy that had if he liked you, he hit you with more goddamn nicknames. At first he nicknamed me Happy Gabe. And then the next name he would call, when I would go out by myself, he would call me Dauntless. But this time, when I fired at that woman under the Jeep, and he turned around, he looked over to me, and he said, and I knew he didn't mean it bad. It just was just another one of his. He says, Gabe, he says, you are a bloodthirsty bastard. But I'll tell you, we held those goddamn Japs back, and our machine gun was firing, and it was firing at the other gun where the Japs took over our other gun, and the tracers were crisscrossing each other in front of us, where they were firing, trying to knock out each other's gun. Well, we finally knocked out their gun, but it was ours that they had taken over. And man, it was a son of a gun at night, and during the night when we stopped them, I just kept screaming because the mortar platoon was firing their mortars with no increments. They were firing those mortars straight up, and they would just barely turn and come down and drop in front of us. And I kept yelling, and I said, knock it off. I said, knock it off. I said, Jim's out there. He was left out there. I had a little bit of hope that he was still alive. And I was frantic, and I'm not kidding you. I was frantic, and I was screaming. I screamed twice. And then who the hell was answering me but Lieutenant Taylor? He was the guy that I was so damn wrong about in New River, North Carolina, when I asked. He looked like the typical Marine, a Marine's Marine. And I says, what does he do in civilian life? And he says, he's a banker. I says, holy crap. I said, he's a banker. He ain't gonna fight. But he was a guy that became my idol. He was a Marine's Marine. And he yelled, he says, Gabe, he says, I know it. He says, I know it. Right in the middle of the night, he yelled that he knew that he was out there. And he knew how we were. And so we stopped him, come to daylight, and as soon as it got daylight, I knew what I had to do. I knew that I had to go out and check on him. But before I even got up, Lieutenant Taylor yelled. He was out in front by himself. He had a combat knife out, and he was cutting the ranks off of their collars. Most of them were officers and non-commissioned officers. And he was cutting the ranks off of their collar. And while he was doing that, I just got up. He said, I don't want nobody to come out here, because he figured that some might be playing possum and pretending to be dead. And I didn't care. I didn't care if they killed me. If they killed me that night, they'd have done me a favor. I walked right out there, and I walked through the god darn Japs laying there. They were covering the whole damn field, and I got right over the next, to Lieutenant Sidemore. I was going to turn him over to try to find out how he was killed, whether killed by my own fire in the back or whether he was killed by the Japs with the hand grenade. I didn't know, and so I couldn't use my arm. My arm was dangling. I couldn't use it. I couldn't bend it, and so I laid my rifle down with my right hand. I put my right hand on his shoulder. I was going to turn him over, and I swear that during the night rigor mortis had set into his body, and I swear that it was running right up my arm, and it got partly right up my arm, and I knew I was going to lose it. And I didn't bother turning him over at all. I grabbed my rifle and I turned around. I came back a little faster than I went out because I was going to blow up. And I got in back of the line, what was left of our company. I got in the back of them. I sat down, laid my rifle down. I sat down. I took my hand. I put it in front of my face like this and to hold it up. And I'm not kidding you. I never cried so hard in all my life, knowing that he was dead. And when I cried like that, I was crying so hard that my whole body was shaking. And the next thing I know, a guy comes over and he puts his hand on my shoulder. And who the hell was it? Well, Lieutenant Taylor. And in this nice nonchalant voice, he turns around, he says, Gabe, he says, we all know how you feel. He says, they set up a hospital tent back of the hedgerow in the rear of the field. He says, why don't you go and let the doctor take a look at your arm? But he calmed me down just the way he talked to me. And so that's just what I did. I got up, I started walking in the back of the field, and I come across one of the girls that was wounded. She was still laying in the back of the field of us. I didn't even know she was there. She was laying there, and her head was facing where we came from, and I stood at her feet, and I looked right into her eyes, and I'm not kidding you. Our eyes just locked into each other, and I looked at that damn wounded leg she had. It was filled with gangrene, you know, and she just never took her eyes off me. I'm the guy that blinked. And she was looking at me, and the first thing that was going through my brain-dead mind was, did she recognize me as the guy that killed her husband? And that's what went through my mind. And I was saying, gee, if I had my cartridge belt with a shot of morphine in it, I'd kneel down and give her a shot of morphine. But I didn't do it. When I got up and I turned and I looked over towards the hill that we got off of, and there was a little Japanese boy that would try to get behind our lines. Somebody had killed him during the night. And he was in a running position. And I said, I don't want no more. I just made up my mind. I didn't want no more. And I walked back, looking through the hedgerow, and sure as hell, there was a doctor sitting under a tent that was set up during the night. He was taking care of the wounded from our friendly fire, and there was Marines laying all over the place. A couple of them were in a cot. A lot of them were on the ground. None was in his tent. And I walked up to him. He says, what can I do for you? And I says, I got a hunk of hand grenade in my arm and I need it taken out. He says, we don't take shrapnel out of anybody on a battlefield. Well, I didn't know that. I was just a dumb 19-year-old kid. I said, I didn't know that. And in his next breath, he turned, when he said that, I felt like taking my rifle and putting it over across his mouth. But then I realized that he had all these wounded guys. He had to be working his tail off all night long on these wounded guys. And he says, next breath, he says, what type blood do you have? And I says, oh. I hesitated first. I says, I have O blood. He says, get over on that cot. He says, I need blood for that guy that's outside of the tent. It's a guy laying on a cot. And so help me, I glanced over at him. And you could just see the dungaree, his whole dungaree jacket was all blood. And so he reached into a box and he got a little bottle of brandy out of it. And he says, drink this and get on that cot. I need some blood. Well, I wasn't a drinker. I couldn't drink whiskey. I hated beer. I never drank either one of them. Didn't have nothing to eat all day. And I was so damn miserable and losing the lieutenant. And I took that damn bottle and I knew that if I tried to sip it, I'd never drink it. So I raised it up and I guzzled the whole bottle down. And I swear that it was going to burn my throat. And I went over there and I laid my rifle on the cot and I turned around, sat on it. Before my head hit the cot, I was gone. I was completely gone. I don't know how much blood he took out of me. When I woke up, I was 13 miles from where I started. It was always way back to where we ended up on D-Day. And they had me laying on the ground. It was 2 days later. I was laying on the ground, and Big John McGlue with his beautiful voice, he turns around, he says, Gabe, he says, you're going to sleep your life away? He says, you better get up, you got the 3rd squad of the 3rd platoon. He says, the 3rd squad is yours. The lieutenant knew I didn't want to be a squad leader. He made me a corporal before we went on site band, and he knew that I didn't want a squad. I wanted to fight with myself. I didn't want no squad to take care of. But after he was killed, they made me take a squad. And so I sat up. All that was there was my rifle. My pack was gone again for the 2nd time. That was the 2nd time I had a saber and a pistol and souvenirs in it, and I left it. I don't know who picked it up, but I never got it back. And I didn't give a damn. I didn't care about it anymore. The lieutenant lost. And so McGlue yelled, and so I looked around and I says, has anybody got a bar of soap? And somebody did throw me a bar. I went out and took my shoes off. I went out. I was in the same clothes and the same underwear for over a month and a half. Same goddamn clothes and sidewalk and socks. Because when I threw my pack away, that was it. Because I just did not believe in carrying a pack. And I was glad, because later on I was going to prove that to other guys that not carrying a pack when you're going to be meeting Japs close by, that how the hell you're going to handle one if one jumps you. So I got into the damn water. I took my clothes off and my dungarees, and if you take your dungarees and you're swishing through that salt water in the ocean, you'd be surprised what the salt water does in cleaning them. You know, because board ship, I had my 2nd set, and a sailor, if I had a spot on my goddamn dungarees, they had to come off, and I had to put my new set on, my other set. Board ship, I said, I met a kid from Amsterdam here, and I said, you got a rope? They said that you tie your clothes to a rope and throw them over the side, and the ship pulling them through the salt water would clean them white. Well, I left them overnight. The morning I pulled up the rope, all I had was threads. So I lost that set. But anyway, I scrubbed my goddamn underwear out and scrubbed the hell out of myself, and it felt good. I got back, put my wet clothes on because they dry in a damn hurry, you know. They dry. Well, we got ready, and I didn't know it. A lot of other guys didn't know it. They says, before we go back to Maui, we got to go through hit Tinian, across the channel, the island of Tinian, where they flew the atomic bomb off. They used that island as a base for the atomic bombs and B-29s, and that's what they wanted Saipan and Tinian for the invasion of Japan. And so I got out of there and got ready. We could get aboard Higgins' boats and we go over to Tinian. And we're invading Tinian. and we moved in on the back of the island. And the back of the island was all rock and jungle growth, and that's where we landed. We got in, we all stretched out, no fire, no fire at all, no one fired a shot, no one fired an artillery shell or anything. We got in there, and I put my squad all behind rocks and covers, made sure they was all covered good, and the colonel, he turns around and he sent word to our company commander, Captain Ellis. He says, move your company into the road. There's a road that was 100 yards in or so, something like that. He says, move your company in on the road and get in formation. Well, I turned around and I says, this guy has got to be a lunatic. I said, he's got to be completely crazy. And half of my squad was new. They were new kids. And the other half was veterans. So I turned around and I said to the squad, I says, and this is my first order that I ever gave a squad. It was the first time. And I said to my squad, I says, don't any one of you move. I says, don't move until I tell you to move. And just as I said that, a sniper shoots Lieutenant Coffey right in the side of the head. He's walking. Captain Ellis is standing there walking. Everybody else is behind rock. Shoots Lieutenant Taylor right through the side of the head. Or not Taylor, but Lieutenant Coffey right through the side of the head. And Captain Ellis, he never moved. Never moved. You think he'd go behind cover? He didn't. But that was the only shot. There wasn't another shot. And then Captain Ellis tells the rest of the squad, or the rest of the company, to move. Get up on the road and get into formation. I told my squad, wait until I give you the word. And they did. They all moved up. And there was a 4-foot rise to the road. And the whole company gets up on the road. And they were in formation. And I had this hunch. I just had a hunch. A hunch saved my life more than once on a battlefield. If I had a hunch and I didn't play it, I was sorry. But every time I had a hunch, it paid off. And so I turned around and they were all in formation. I was the 3rd squad of the 3rd platoon. And so I was the end of the company. And every time we was on a line, I was the flank, always the flank. If somebody didn't tie into us, we didn't have anybody tying into us. I was just about ready to tell my squad, okay, let's get and go. And the whole company up on the road got caught in a crossfire. 2 Jap machine guns opened up and caught the whole company in a crossfire. And if you ever want to see some guys that hit behind a rock that was off the side of the road, there was a rock. I didn't see till later. It was, you could put a truck behind it. It seemed like the whole damn company got behind that damn rock. When all they had to do was just get back off the road and drop down that 4-foot ridge, and they didn't do it. They stayed up there. Some of them laid out in the open field. It was all open field on the other side of the road. And my squad and me are still behind the rocks. Holy crap. And then I stood up when the machine guns opened up and they started spraying them. There was 2 guys from the south, 2 southern guys that were laying in a field just on the other side of the road. And I was staying up and no fire was coming anywhere near me. And I looked at those 2 guys and you could see, just like in a movie, you see a guy opening up with a machine gun and he's going to try to hit a couple of guys running, and you could see the bullets kick up the dirt. Well, that's just what happened there. I could see the string of machine gun fire coming, and these 2 guys were laying side by side, two kids, southern boys. And the machine gun fire got him right over the body, and one never moved. But the other one, he wasn't dead. And he turned around and he got up, he pushed himself up on his knees. He pushed himself up on his knees and he went like this, and he started singing that Baptist song, that we will meet by the river. And then he turned around and he started singing that, and then he fell on his face. And all I could think of is how I could get a shot at the colonel. Unreal. And this is where we lost Lieutenant Taylor. We lost all our other officers on Saipan. Lieutenant Taylor was the last one left. And when those machine guns opened up, he had guts enough to turn around and try to knock one out by crossing an open field to get to a patch. There was these jungle patches out that was spotted in these open fields, just spots of jungle patch. And the rest of the fields were just all open. He turned around and he made a dive for that one machine gun, and they riddled him. And he would have never got through, but he did it. And when they killed him, I thought, oh, Jesus, every guy that's becoming my friend, I'm losing them. And so the other guys on the machine gun must have put a bullet in their head, because I don't know of anybody that knocked it out. And they said, okay, we want to move. And we started moving up through the open field to get to the higher ground. And so I said, I'll give my squad a break. We come to a patch of jungle in front of my section where I had nobody on my left flank. And I told my squad, I said, get into the jungle growth and I'll stand outside. And I stood outside and I followed. I walked up the long side of this patch. They were inside the patch. All of a sudden, my guard was down. I just was hanging with my rifle. And a Jap jumps out, so help me God. A Jap jumped out. He was armed to the teeth. He had a saber. He had a 7.7 pistol in a hard case. He had his rifle. And he had a hand grenade, and he had already activated it. They activate a hand grenade on it, they hit their helmet with it to activate the thing. And he started walking right to me, and he turned his back quick, and he put the hand grenade up against his chest, and he was armed that much. He put the hand grenade up against his chest, and he fell on the hand grenade. Sometimes a guy can be a man, and then other times he could turn into a damn boy. Well, Jesus, when he did that, I didn't think about, well, being on guard, that there might be another one come out. My squad was in the jungle growth, moving through it. I turned around and I kneeled down. I turned the Jap over. Everything in his chest was gone. Everything was gone. It was just red ribs. And I turned into a little boy, and I wanted to take his saber off. Naturally, I was going to take his saber off, unhook the belt, and it got blood on it. And he was a real dude. He had a little couple puffs there, these dangling puff balls hanging off that saber with a chain, and it got blood on the thing. And I says, why the hell did you do that? You got blood on your saber. That's what I'm saying. That's only means that you turn into a little boy to say something like that. So anyway, I stripped him. I took the saber, tied it to my pack. My pack was empty. I had that empty when it was empty again. And I put that in there. I put the pistol back in. I took his wallet. And while I'm doing this, who the hell comes out of the jungle growth but Giordano again? And he looks at me. Gabe, he says, damn you, he says, you're always in the right place at the right time. And then, Jesus. But he was a gem. He was a gem. So that pistol and that saber I have in my collection in the cellar. I kept those things. I kept his wallet. I got his wallet in a case. But the other ones I lost, and they were better sabers that I had. They were more or less an officer saber. This one was he was an NCO, had to be sergeant or something, and their saber was a little bit shorter than a regular lieutenant's saber. But anyway, I kept that stuff, and And the only way I was ever going to get it back is when we got back to Maui, and I'd give it to my brother. My brother was in the artillery, and they never walked. They rode on trucks, and I gave him my souvenirs. He's the one who brought them home for me. I would have never got them home. But anyway, we moved past it, and it wasn't a hell of a lot of work to finish cleaning up the island. When we got on the other side, it had a beautiful beach. The beach was, the sand was white, and the water was blue. And so we turned around and we left. We cleaned the island up. There was only supposed to be 9,000 Japs on it, but I couldn't see it. I figured a lot of them moved over to Saipan when we were taking Saipan. So we cleaned up that island, and so we got to go board ship, and we're going back to Maui. And that's the way we did it. We was on our way back to Maui, and I climbing the nets to get board ship, and there's two lieutenants, and they pointed to me and said, "Get over here." And they knew that I was a goddamn clean kid, so they wanted a guy to serve them aboard ship in their galley. And because we didn't have hot meals aboard that ship. And I figured, well, geez, I'm going to eat like the officer's going to eat. Well, the first morning was good, had bacon in it, or not bacon, eggs, but hotcakes and eggs. And we get them and serve them to the officers. And then at night, we had to go in the galley to get sandwiches for them. I walked into this galley to get a sandwich, and that ended up my goddamn chow. A Filipino cook was making the sandwiches, took the top slice off the sandwich and spit in it, put the top slice back on, and that was the end of mine. I slept with one eye open, figuring he was going to throw me overboard. But anyway, we got back to Maui and had replacements waiting for us, and we had to retrain, and this is where I got in a fight, because I got a list of guys that became deserters. There was 3 from this area that became deserters, and one, his name was Charlie Butt. When we hit Saipan, he never got off the beach. And every night, Lieutenant Sizemore would say, when we get back to Maui, he says, I'm going to give him a general court-martial and send him to the Portsmouth Naval Prison. He stayed right on the beach. He never got off the beach. We had another guy by the name of William Smith from West Virginia. He turned around and he was the toughest Marine. As soon as we got out of boot camp, he had a Marine Corps uniform. He looked like he was God's gift to the Marine Corps. He was, I got caught on liberty with him in Los Angeles because a friend of mine from Rome, New York, Ed Busick, was his friend, and he says, come on, Gabe, he says, for the first time, I was restricted for 3 months. And he says, come with us, we'll go to L.A. I went to him down L.A., and we were crossing a street. They ended up getting a hotel for the night, and that West Virginia jerk picked up some slut on the way, and we were crossing the street, and there was two Army MPs crossing the street. Well, this stupid jerk started to leave. He was going to jump behind him and knock him down, figuring that everybody was scum except him. He was a Marine, and this is how stupid he was. And then we left him, and I said to Busick, I said, you better dump this guy or you're going to be in trouble. I said, the MPs are going to pick this guy up if you don't. Straighten him out. He started walking down the street, and there's 2 petty officers, Navy petty officers, and he started to run after those petty officers. Busick had to run after him. They got into the room, and I couldn't drink. They had a bottle with them, and I got into the damn room, and I started laying on the bed. I wanted to go to sleep, because that sleep is what I had never got enough of. And as soon as it got dark, I had to go to sleep. I was one of those guys that had that kind of a sickness. So I laid on the bed. The other two guys are drinking. The girl, they fooling around with the girl. They take a bottle of ink. They threw it all over the damn wall. All the pillows were filled with feathers. And they opened up a pillow, and they had a pillow fight, and there was feathers all over the thing. And wanted to go to sleep, and Ed Ducey come over. He took his fist. You can't go to sleep. You got to drink with us. And he took his fist and he come right down on my stomach with that fist. I buckled right up like an accordion and fell on the floor. When we got back to Maui, I was in a hospital with a hernia. And when these guys pulled this, first thing in the morning, I said, I'm leaving these guys. I got out of the hotel, and a woman was coming to clean her room, and they didn't have a cart then. This woman had an armful of sheets, pillowcases. She opened up the door, and she took one look in that room with all those feathers and everything over the walls and she just dropped everything, and she took her hands and put them up. Oh my God! And that's how I took off, and I left them. But anyway, we got back, and the MPs picked them up, but yet they brought them back so that we could turn around and go to Iwo Jima. And I never dreamed that, that goddamn guy would follow us, and he didn't. He left. When he got back to the base, and we got overseas, we got on Maui, we were in I'm getting ahead of myself. He is the one on Saipan when we were moving that day to where we had the day and hit all that damn Jap fire. He turned around as we were moving. He says, I'm not going to do this. I see stars in front of my eyes. And he turned around and he went to the rear. I've never seen any more of him. He just deserted. Nobody went after him. The captain didn't send anybody after him. Just let him go. He was the second guy that was a desert. So we got ready anyway. We got ready on my way to go to. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know, and we had two sets of twins in our company, and one got hit on Saipan, and he wanted to stick with his brother. He was in a hospital, Pearl Harbor. When we got down there to go to Iwo Jima and go aboard ship, he left the hospital and followed us. He didn't have to go. Their names was Leo and Theo Brown from Georgia. They were both from Georgia. You couldn't tell them apart. And so we ended up, we was out at sea for one day or 2 days, and then they got us together, and they says we were going to hit a little island called Iwo Jima. And they says that being that you guys were bloodied on Saipan, that we shouldn't take more than 5 days to take this island. And so they showed us the little pork chop island on the way out, and we got to Iwo Jima. And I didn't want to fight no more. I'll tell you, I didn't want to fight no more. But I missed the spot the first night on Tinian. The first night on Tinian, I was in a foxhole, and we were short of men from Saipan. To give me a full squad, they gave me some men from the 2nd Marine Division. They were leaving. We were going to have to stay and take Tinian. So the first night, I'm in a foxhole, and I have a kid that I looked at him. I didn't trust him. For some reason, I had a hunch I didn't trust him. And I says, where are you from? He says, California. I says, are you married? He says, yes. I said, you got any kids? Yes, I got one. So I figured, I says, I better let him stay in my foxhole. Because I just didn't trust him. And so I figured that we might get a counterattack the first night. So I took the first watch to midnight. And I said to the kid, I says, I'll take the watch to midnight, I'll wake you up, and then you take the second watch. If the Japs are going to hit us, they're going to hit us probably right after dark. But they didn't. I turned around, I laid down in my foxhole, my rifle over my stomach, and I don't know how long I was there. Just I couldn't get sound asleep because I never could. But yet I was dozing. And all of a sudden, something told me to open up my eyes. I opened up my eyes, and there in the corner of the foxhole, he was in the corner. He was sound asleep. A Jap was on his knees in the corner, and I never moved. I just swung my rifle around and I fired a hair too quick. I fired the first round and I turned around and it went through his arm and it cut his arm in half, and his arm was dangling, and he was screaming and he was crying. He was screaming and he was crying. And I didn't know what the hell was all about yet, because I knew I didn't knock him down away from the foxhole. So I fired my second round into his body and it blew him away from the hole. And then when I started firing, then a flare went off. But when I fired the first shot, the guy woke up. And he was raising his head when I fired the second shot. And I didn't care if I blew his head off. And I'm telling you right now, I didn't care if I blew his head off. And it went right over the top of his helmet. And it hit the Jap. And then I jumped up and I looked out of the foxhole to look at him. And sure as hell there, when the flare went off, he was laying there. I see his arm in half, and he's on his back, and he's still crying, and he's screaming. And I couldn't do nothing for him. So I put my rifle out of the hole again. I put a shot in the side of his head, and it was quiet. And then, when I hear me scream at that guy, I screamed at that son of a gun. I says, I should put a hole right through your head right now. I said, if you ever close your eyes again, I guarantee you, you're not going to open them. And I had to leave him like that for the rest of the night.
Okay, let's stop here.
Okay. Why the hell do they need so many ships for a little island like this? That's what comes through my mind. And then while I was running from hole to hole, and I looking over towards Mount Suribachi, the goddamn Italian extraction came to me again, and I turned around and looked over, and the whole beach was all pot-marked with holes, with shell holes, artillery shells, naval gunfire, all holes, right up against one another. And I looked and I says, holy crap, to myself, I says, the beach looks like a macaroni strainer. Then those are the exact words I used, and I kept going. I got to the berm, and I sat there, and I'm telling you, I was in the safest place on the beach. All the fire was coming over the airfields and over the berm. And the shells weren't coming down at the beginning of the beach. They were all hitting the goddamn beach. And you could see the shells coming in just like you're watching a movie. Hitting all kinds of, hitting craft coming in. Some of the goddamn sailors didn't even wait for the Marines to unload, and they started backing up. But the whole beach was carnage. The whole damn beach was all the way over. Everybody trying to find a place to hide to get out from under the shell fire. If a shell didn't get a guy, the second one did. And nobody was off the beach. So here, and all of a sudden I'm looking down, and I'm looking at my squad. I never dreamed in 100 years that squad would follow me, because over half of them were new. The regular Marines that were with me that went through the whole damn 4 battles was McGlue, was Giordano, and the rest of them were all new kids. Some were 17 and 18 years old. So here comes the kids. Here comes my whole squad, right in one behind the other. They're doing the same thing that I did, in one hole and out the other. They all got up to me but the 12th man. And the 12th man was going past the tank, and the guys in the tank, they could have seen that. If they looked, they could have seen the embrasures on that bunker, but they didn't see it. They just stayed right in their tank. And when they seen that I was up on the top of the beach and my squad was coming up, they opened up the tank and the guy was getting out. Just as that guy was getting out of that tank, the Japs knew that I had breached the beach, and they turned around and took all their fire, and they changed part of their fire. They had to call back for the fire to hit the right flank, because there was no fire there at all when I hit. There wasn't one shell that fell. And then they started blasting it. So the shell hit the top of that tank just when the guy was getting out, and it blew his guts and blood all over my 12th man, and his name was Stifler. And I got a story about that, because 2 weeks ago, I was watching a midnight a History Channel, and who the hell was on there that they're interviewing was Stifler, and I never heard from him. And to show you that he was a damn liar, he turned around and he's telling these people that were interviewing him, he says, Iwo Jima was something else. He says, I don't know much about the Battle of Iwo Jima. He says, because I don't want to know. And I know damn well when he said that, I said to the wife and I yelled, my boy was up in Connecticut. I says, holy Christ, that kid was in my squad. He was the 12th man. Well, the company commander evacuated him because when it blew the guts and everything over the kid, he went nuts. 17 years old, and he was a basket case. And the captain turned around, and I got the word later that the captain had said he had been promoted to major, Captain Ellis. And he said, you look like an old man, and he evacuated him. That was the last of him. Never seen him or heard of him. Never seen him at a reunion at all. As a matter of fact, I sent for the tape to, because I want to show that goddamn tape. If anybody wants to know what that guy did, that's what he did. He just went crazy, and they took him off. But anyway, the rest of them all got up to the top, and I had them all stretched across the berm. My whole squad was stretched across the berm. And then I says, holy crap, we got to work. So I let them rest for about 5-10 minutes. I don't know how much it was. And I said, let's go. And we're going to turn around and we're going to clean and check this hill on the right. And I put them in a skirmish line. And to do that, I had to go partly way back down the beach again. Because I stayed on the flank and I left them all inside of me. And I went right past that bunker when the guy opened up with a Bertha machine gun, and who the hell did he get? The biggest man in the squad, and I figured that he must have figured that he was somebody. He turned around and he riddled Big John McGlue. And it broke, Jesus, I'm telling you what it, but, and then I'm getting ahead of myself again, so I turned around, I hit the ground, and I had a rifle grenadier with me that was brand new. He never seemed to have fired a rifle grenade before. And I'm looking right into the embrasures of that bunker, the two openings. And I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, put a grenade in that bunker. And he fired one. And he didn't know how to hold it. He didn't hold it at 6 o'clock, and knowing that the rifle was going to kick up with a grenade on it, and it went over the top of the bunker. I said, put another one on and give it to me. He gave it to me. I turned around, I held it at 6 o'clock, held it down. That shell went into that bunker, and the Jap went out the back. And he was no little pipsqueak of a Jap. He was a husky son of a gun. And he started to climb the berm. And I figured I wasn't going to kill no more. I was going to make good veterans out of my squad. And so he started to climb it, and it was another mistake. It was the biggest mistake anybody ever made on Iwo Jima. All I had to do was run up and grab him by the seat of the pants, and we would have had a prisoner right there, the first morning of the battle. And I didn't know that I made a mistake, just like with my big mouth. I didn't know it until after I turned around and they yelled. I yelled to a new kid that was in my squad by the name of Keith Walters from Connecticut. And he resembled me, you know, and he was identical. He was a fanatic for being clean, and I had a lot of, I figured he's going to make a hell of a good Marine when you give him a little push. So I yelled to him, I said, Walters, I says, knock him down. And he wouldn't do it. And I had to scream louder. I said, Walters, I says, knock him down. And then he did. He got behind him, and he fired. And where the hell does he hit him? He hit him right in the rear end. Shot him right in the rear end, and he rolled down, and that was the end of it. But what hurt me was when they yelled, and they said, Gabe, they got McGlue. They got McGlue. And so I had to turn around and get back up, and I moved the squad past it. Once you take out a bunker, you're always told to overrun it. Don't dilly-dally around. So I pushed the squad, and I had to leave McGlue where he was on the left-hand flank.
I pushed the squad to the right, and I went down into that damn bunker, and I wouldn't go down head first. I wouldn't go down head first. I went down there where my feet. I wanted to know what the hell was all about with that bunker. And sure as hell, I'm not kidding you a bit, the whole bottom of that floor, he had to be firing that machine gun from the minute that the landing came. And he had a wide opening. You look out the embrasure and you see the whole beach. All he had to do was squeeze the trigger up and down that beach with that damn machine gun. The bottom of that floor was ankle deep in empty shells. And that machine gun there, he kept it going. And I figured that it had to be two things wrong. One, that it had to jam because he was firing it so fast, or the other, it had to jam because it overheated. And I was wondering why. I kept yelling after I got out of that bunker. Why didn't he kill me? Why didn't he kill me when I'm running up there? And why didn't he take out my squad? I figured that if the other thing that it could have been that he had a hot rifle or had a machine gun. If it overheated in Guadalcanal, they used to urinate on it to try to cool it down. But those are the only two things that could happen why he didn't cut my squad down. It's because that gun had to jam some way. And then when it got cool, then it fired another burst, and he fired a burst and got McGlue, and he picked McGlue out of the whole squad because he was the biggest man. He must have thought he was getting somebody. And so we went past the bunker. And then all of a sudden, I thought, when I was up against that berm, I thought about looking down on the beach, and I'm glad I didn't do it, because if I did it, I wouldn't be here. I was going to get up and motion for the guys to get off the beach, that they were safer up by the berm. And I didn't do that either. I just sat there and just watched. And then, son of a gun, and then just after I started moving the squad, then they started to move. They started getting off the beach, and it was at that time that there was about 10 minutes, or about 1 hour in between, that there was a little lull in the fight. And I figured that what they must have been doing is they must have pulled back to the second line of defense, because there was a little period there where it dropped down, and then they started getting off the beach. Well, while I was on that up against that berm by my back, John Basilone, he started to get his squad off the beach, and he couldn't get it off. He moved a few yards in, and the guys that were following him, a shell dropped. It killed not only John Basilone, it killed the rest of the guys around him. He didn't have to go into that battle. He had the Congressional Medal of Honor on a Guadalcanal. He didn't have to go. He got off after, because I've never seen a movie yet, a video yet, of anybody that took pictures of that beach at that time. None. And I've seen a lot of videos because I'm a history nut. That's the only thing I was good at in high school was history. But everything else I was dumber than hell. And so we got off, and then when everybody started to move, we was on that beach and couldn't move. We was on that beach for 5 days. We was on that beach when they went up with the first flag, and I was one of the guys, and so was a couple of the other ones. But just after they got McGlue, who the hell does what he should have never done was Giordano. He was a top-notch kid. He turned around and always said it on Saipan, if Gabe can do it, I can do it. He turned around, and after they shot McGlue, he climbs up the goddamn berm, and he was the only guy that ever got on top in 5 days. And you were open. They had openings for machine guns. They had openings for pillboxes. They were all crisscross. You couldn't even move. You couldn't even move. And he turns around and gets up, and they let him get in just a little ways. They let him get in, and they cut him down. And it wasn't until afternoon that I turned around and looked up and see. And it don't take long for a body to blow. And he was out there and his body was all bloated up. The dungarees get to be tight and they're really baggy at the beginning. And then they were really tight. And they couldn't pick him up till nightfall. And where the hell are they going to put him? We didn't have no cemetery. But so anyway, I got off to the right and there was all these little trenches from that bunker that were only 2 and 3 feet deep, where the Japs would come out and get into the bunker, get back out, and then try to get out and get back on top of the berm again, where they had tunnels. In front of our zone of action was a tunnel that was 800 yards long. 800 yards. Openings and exits. At night, when we got moving in, sometimes you'd be laying on the ground. You could hear the little bastards underneath you. But it took a hell of a time. It took the hell of a time. We were losing men every day. And then we turned around and one of the set of twins that was in our company, they killed the brother right in front of his arm. He died in his brother's arms. Leo and Theo Brown. One died in the other's arms, and the other one later on got wounded. But then they come in, we had another set of twins that were replacements. Then the replacements, and the same thing happened. A guy dies in his brother's arm. 2 sets of twins. So we were moving, and then all of a sudden you get the word, Vertucci, we gotta move. I never seen a lieutenant. Now this is 100% true. I never seen a lieutenant on that island until the 32nd day. They called back to Washington, D.C. the 30th day, said the battle's secure, or the island is secure. It was a lot of baloney. We still had the meat grinder to go into yet. Where the last pocket of the Japs were in the meat grinder. That was where General Yaki Boyachi's headquarters were. 3 compartments down below on the end of the island. And they had that one last rocket, which we never seen before on our other battles. They had a rocket that looked like a mammoth stovepipe. It would when it would go up like a slow motion. And the damn thing you'd wonder how the hell it was getting it up there. And then you had to look and see where it was going to turn. And if it was going to turn towards us, we had to get up and run. They never had them before. Even the Japs that fired it was scared to fire it when they interviewed a prisoner. So we were moving just few feet at a time. And then all these goddamn guys that were in my squad that wasn't hit, they all started bunching up, and I was yelling and screaming every day, don't bunch up. But they always wanted to be with somebody that they felt safe with. And you know, if a kid's scared, he's petrified, he's always going to cuddle up to himself and hug himself. He'll hug himself and make him look like he was a snail. He gets so scared. And the one guy that really followed me and stayed right on me like honey to a bear's mouth was Vito Podesta, a new kid. He was right on my tail all the time. If I moved, he was right there. But we would move and sometimes we didn't move at all. And it was just living on your belly. You couldn't get up and walk. That whole damn battle was just on your belly. And then this one got done. At night we were going to try to set up a line, and what was in front of us was a little hill with a flat bunch of rock. And I got up on it. There was ridges that led to it, and I got up on top of it, and Vito Podesta was next to me, and I had this hunch. I said, Christ, somebody comes around the side of that hill, they're going to throw a hand grenade, and there's no way you're going to get away from it. So I looked over to the left, and I seen a branch of a tree. And it was all branches on branches, no leaves. So I ran over, I grabbed it, and I put that in front of us, and we laid behind it for the night. Just as it was getting dark, a Jap throws a hand grenade. And you could see it coming. And I yelled at Vito, get off the ledge, get off the... We rolled off of it, and the hand grenade hit that branch. So help me as I'm standing here, or sitting here. It didn't go through. It was so thick that the hand grenade didn't go through. If it went through, it would have fouled us onto the ledge. But it exploded, it blew that branch to matchsticks, blew it on top of us, but we had to stay there. We couldn't go back, and we had to stay there. And that was the way it worked every damn day there. You just move a little bit and stay. Crawl. And then I tell them all the time, before you get up to move to advance, before you do, pick out a spot where you're going to land. And don't make up your mind that you're going to get up there, and then when you're up there, you're going to look around and find a spot, because he'll get you between the eyes while you're standing there. Every guy they killed more guys, shot him between the eyes on that island than any battle that we've ever been into. So they used to do that. They would look first and pick a spot, and that's the way we fought that battle, all the way up. And we had a sergeant. I never seen him. He was still behind us, always behind. And on a whole damn battle, I'm going to tell you something that you won't believe, and I said you wouldn't believe it. There was never a guy after McGlue was shot, there was never a Marine that died in front of me. I knew I was going to die. Because one day on the beach, I turned around, and when I seen all these kids, and they...
Hi. May I ask what program this is, or?
We're video.
Okay.
So anyway, so that made me lose my trance, but where the hell was I? I was on that.
You're talking about the grenade.
Yeah, so after they threw that grenade, so then we started moving, and they keep yelling from behind, Vertucci, we gotta move, we gotta move. Our sergeant was behind us. I never seen him. I never seen a lieutenant. So I'd move, and I'd move. And that's when I shook my fist. I shook my fist at the Lord. And I said, you can't be up there. I didn't believe in God on Iwo Jima, I'll tell you that right now. I didn't believe in God. And I shook my fist. I said, these kids not even firing a shot. And I was looting them left and right. So that was the way we were moving. We kept moving and moving. And I look around, and I don't see no corporals, I don't see no sergeant. And we kept going.
Could you, you were wounded on Iwo Jima. Could you talk about that?
That was almost the last day.
Mm-hmm.
So here we were losing men left and right, and we got to the, I'll jump a lot of these spots here. I'll jump to the last end of the battle when we was going into the meat grinder. They send us into the meat grinder where the Japs would let us get in, and then they grind us up. And then, so they did that with the F Company, our sister company. They put them in day ahead of us, and they were annihilated. They were gone. The next day, they put us in there. We got down in there, and it was the same identical thing. I believed in two things in the Marine Corps on those islands. I believed in two things, that history repeats itself, and I believed that the law of averages has got to catch up to you, that no man can fight in 3-4 battles and not get killed or wounded. I says, it can't be done. I says, the more you fight, the more your ranks are getting smaller and smaller. We left San Diego with 242 men in our company. I was down to 8 men on Iwo Jima. And some of them were replacements, they weren't original. And so we got to this last goddamn meat grinder. And they said, Vertucci, we gotta move. So down I went with what I had left. So we get down in there, it was the same identical thing as Saipan, with those rocks separate, standing there like they were put in there by a crane. Some was like a catapult, some had points on them. I made up my mind I was going to crawl up on one, and I did. I crawled up on one and I laid on it. It was like a catapult. And I'm laying there, and all these other goddamn guys, they turn around and they go over behind the other bunch of rocks, what was left of my goddamn company, and what do you think the hell you're doing? They ain't moving. They're telling dirty jokes. They were telling dirty jokes. And all of a sudden, I look ahead of me, there's 2 Japs, identical to the last day on Saipan. One is standing and one is kneeling, and they're pointing up at me up on a rock. And I took my rifle, I just swung it around, I hit the first one standing with 2 rounds, knocked him down. The other one, I hit him with 2 rounds, and he was crawling. It was identical to the one on Saipan. And then I said, you stupid jerks. I said, they're crawling up on us. They were coming out of their holes. It was the end of the island. And those last batch. And so, what did they do? They all run. They got up and they ran. They left me there. And so I got off of that goddamn rock, and I figured I was going to get it as I was going out. So I got out, climbed up on the goddamn top again, and they splattered up on the top somewhere. And it was going to be getting dark not too long. It was the end of the day, and it was going to be getting dark, and we had to set some kind of a line. If they crawled up on us, they could have jumped right on us, and we wouldn't even know it. So I was looking for an empty spot, and I looked out. I found an empty spot, and at the edge of it, I think this is where I'll dig my foxhole. And I said, when I dig the foxhole, I said, you guys follow me, and you spread out on the side of me. I get out there, and I'm trying to dig a hole. And I got my trencher too, and I'm hitting it in the ground. It's mostly all rock. It was all rock. And the helmet was coming over my eyes, and it kept coming down my eyes, and I just left it there. And it was just lucky that it covered my eyes. And all of a sudden, the whole thing went quiet. Everything went quiet. And I wasn't on the island at all. And this is true. I wasn't on the island at all. I was up in the damn universe, and all I could see was orange stars, a big bunch of orange stars, hundreds of them. And out of that orange stars came my mother. And she was as clear as you are sitting there. And she come right up to me, and she just as clear, and then she drifted back, went back into all those orange stars, and then I found myself coming back. And my eyes opened. When my eyes opened, I was on Iwo Jima. My eyes was already open up there. I could see. But when they had to reopen when I was on Iwo Jima, on the ground. And so, my face was all bloody. The bullet went right through the front of my helmet. It ricocheted up under the top. It took the top of my head off. The scars still there. Took the roots out of my hair and took everything off the top of my head. And I was just paralyzed. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, and blood shot out from under my helmet, getting sticky on my eyelashes. And all of a sudden, I didn't know where Vito Podesta was. He left me. I figured that he either got hit or he's in a hole somewhere and he's not going to go anywhere. Just a few minutes before I got hit, a sergeant that lives up in Lake Placid, I never seen him in the whole battle. He just followed. All of a sudden, he's in a hole next to me and behind me, and I hear a shot. And I look around, and here he is coming out of the goddamn hole with holding his hand and his finger. He shot 2 of his fingers off. I don't know how the hell he could shoot 2 fingers off with an M1, but he did. He's holding his hand in his other hand, and he's running, and he left. That was the last I seen him. But I met him here after that, because he came down a few times, and I had a hell of a job to keep from looking at his hand, but I did. And he had his 2 fingers gone, so he disappeared. And then here comes Vito Podesta. He came from nowhere, and he's crying, and he's like this, and he's praying. He was a hell of a religious kid. He's praying like this, and he's crying, and he grabbed my one hand, he tried to pull me, and he's sliding on a rock, and he can't pull me. I was half in a hole that I had started to dig, and I finally got to the point where I says to Vito, Vito, if you're going to try to pull me out of the line of fire, I says, just brace yourself and grab my arm, grab my left arm, and I'll pull myself. And that's how I got out. I grabbed his hand, and he held it, and he pulled me out a little bit at a time. I was pulling myself, but I didn't know where my right arm was. And I started yelling at him, "Where's my right arm? Where's my right arm?" And he never answered me. And I didn't know where my right arm was until they pulled me out. He got me out of the line of fire by me pulling myself, and then I realized that all the time that I was pulling myself, my arm was under my belly. and I didn't know it was there because it paralyzed me from my neck all the way down. And the only thing that was moving was my left arm and my left leg. And here he is crying. He's crying and he's praying. And he got me out and he called for a stretcher. A stretcher come down. They rolled me on a stretcher, and he's not kneeling on next to the stretcher, and he's crying, and he was going nuts with that. And I said, Vito, I says, I'm all right. I thought it was, but I started to think, I says, it looks like I'm going to go home a cripple, because I didn't know what was happening to my body. And I look over, and there's Big Fred Wood, the guy that come through the whole damn battle, was just a guy that was a survivor. He knew how to survive, but he never fought. He was always on the tail end. He was standing there up against a big rock. He was looking at me, never turned around and tried to come over and help me. I met him at a reunion later after the war, and I wouldn't even talk to the son. But anyway, so they sent a couple guys up to would pull me off in the stretcher, and they couldn't. They couldn't get me over it was all rock, and they couldn't climb the rocks with just 2 men. So they had to get another 2 guys. It took 4 guys to get me. And they turned around and got me off the top of that damn island, and they moved me down through rock to part way down was a hospital jeep, and they carried 2 bodies at a time, and they put me on board the hospital jeep, and it was dark by that time. Got down by the end of the airfield, and edge of the airfield, they had a hospital tent set up. And they put me in there, and the guy that worked on my head was a guy that I would like to meet. I'd like to have met him all my life, but I never got to. And he put me on a table inside the tent with a lantern, and he turned around, and the first thing he says, fella, he says, there ain't no way in hell that bullet could have been any closer. And I started fooling around with him. He says, the only way that I could work on you, he says, I'm going to try to freeze your head. And I didn't know what the hell he meant when he freeze it. But anyway, he worked on that. After he got done with it, he turned around and he said, well, look, he says this, and these were his exact words. He says, I cannot do any more with your head. He says, that's all I could do, so they'll work on you in a hospital with an OR, and I'll see that they fly you off the island in the morning to the hospital 111 on the island of Guam. And they flew me off there. And I was fooling with them. I said, don't leave your glove in that hole and all that. Just a man that turns into a kid. And then he put me back outside. And I was laying there all night, right out in the damn open. And I didn't know why my body was paralyzed, and I didn't have the guts enough to ask them until they got me into the hospital 111. They put me in a bed. 4 doctors come in. The head doctor comes over, and he looks, and he says, he looked at my head, and then he turned around, he said to the other 3 doctors, come over and look. And they came over and they looked at the big crease in the top of my head, and then the 3 doctors went back, the head doctor came over, he says, I don't know who that doctor was that worked on you on Iwo Jima. He says, because there ain't nothing else that we could do to improve it. And he said he was fixing me up temporary. Wasn't temporary at all. And they never did a thing. They never touched me. I never went into the OR. They bandaged me up, and I was there paralyzed for 7 days. 8th day, they shipped me to Honolulu, and we're going to ship you to the Royal Hawaiian Hotel for 5 days of R&R, and give me a ticket. And I was leaving the hotel when we got there. I was leaving the hotel the next morning. I wanted to go to Honolulu and see what that was all about. And a lieutenant was by the doorway, and he turns around, he sees me with my head all bandaged up, white. The whole lobby was full of Marines ready to leave, and he pokes his finger over at me, just like the guys in the ship, the lieutenants in the ship, when they wanted me to work into their galley aboard the ship. And he says, stand over here. And I says, what do you want me for? He says, I got a work detail for you. And I'm telling you, when he said that, I went buzz. I blew my mind. I said, you gotta be crazy. I didn't know who he was. I had never seen him before. And it blew my mind that he was gonna put me on a week detail, or a work detail, and I was on EWO 8 days before. And he says, calm down now, calm down. He said something to me that he was pointing to another kid, to get another kid over. So he points over to this other kid, picks out what he wanted, brings him over there, and then he says, trust me. That's what he was saying. He says, trust me. And so I figured, Jesus, if you're going to put me on a work detail, he says, there's a bucket and a mop and a broom. So if I'm going to have to go somewhere with a kid, I'm going to take the broom. I ain't going to push no mop. So I took the broom. This kid comes over, never heard him speak or anything. He was just a kid. And he grabbed the mop, and the lieutenant said to me, he says, you go down this street. We was right on the edge of Waikiki Beach. He says, you go down this street, and you're going to come to a cove, and there's going to be a bunch of nurses' quarters lined up, all alike. He says, I want you to clean the decks of those nurses' quarters. And so help me. You ain't going to believe it, but I'll tell you anyway. And so we go down. But when I left the hotel, there was a table right out alongside the edge of the road and the beach. Was a table, was food on it that I had never seen in my life. A long table with all kinds of food on it, and 5 cooks standing in the back of it. No chairs, no tables, or nothing. So we go down and we go into the cove. I get up on the first deck. I leave the kid down below. Never heard him open his mouth. I got the broom. I got up on the deck. I says, and I had a loud voice. I says, Christ. I says, this deck don't need cleaning. And so I walked off. There was 3 steps lead up to it, and then it was the doorway into the bungalows. And when I started to walk down the steps, the door opens. And so help me, there was a nurse inside that doorway, hiding behind the door frame. All I could see was her head and a bare leg and a bare arm. And she turned around and she says, would you fellows like to come in for a piece of cake? And brain was weird. I lost part of my marbles, and then I yelled to the kid. I says, that lieutenant that was sending it over here was a pimp. He says he was a pimp. So I quit. I said to the kid, you want to go in? And he didn't say nothing. So I took it for a no. And then I said, hell with it. So I went over to the next one, looked at the next deck, and that was nothing. It was all clean. And this is what he was sending us over for. 2 kids sending us over there for the nurses. I says, come on, let's get out of here. Put the muck and pail up against a tree and a broom, and I says, we're going back to where I seen that table full of food. 2 of us went back there. He never opened his mouth. I never heard his voice. And I walked up there, and there's those cooks standing behind there, all in monkey suits with the big white hat. There was meats and turkey and everything on one end, and the whole table was full. And we haven't had a hot meal in over almost 2 years or 2 months, you know. And so I grabbed the plate. They never said a word. I grabbed the plate, and they were real plates. I started to go put it over the top of what I wanted, you know, for meat. And then the cooks lined up, and they started filling my plate. Well, I couldn't put a hell of a lot on it. There was too much here. But I let them fill the plate, and then I got off. I got out, and went over and sat next to the road in Waikiki Beach. No chairs or nothing. Sat down there, and I started eating. The kid followed me, did the same thing. Not one of those cooks ever opened their mouth. I don't know what the table was for, who the food was for. And when we got done eating, that was the end. It must have did something to my brain, because I don't remember ever getting on a boat right away. They put us on a boat to send us to the States, and it was going to Treasure Island. And I don't remember that boat trip from that if you eat a lot and on a stomach that's been empty for so long, they say it could affect you some way. Well, it must have affected me. But when I opened my eyes again and knew where the hell I was aboard ship, and we were going under the Golden Gate Bridge, and we landed at Treasure Island. And this is where they sent us, told us where we were going after we go home for 30-day furlough. And they
Now, when were you discharged?
January of 47.
Can you tell us, how do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Well, I did, because the lieutenant, and every night, he says, Gabe, when this war is over, he says, you're going to Kentucky with me. And just before he got killed, the night before he got killed, he says, Gabe, he says, you and Duggar, Don Duggar was the other good kid that I was friend with, he says, you two, you never failed to do what I asked you. And because he always believed in sending patrols out at night. And Duggar and myself were the only two that he trusted, because most of them wouldn't go. They'd go out a few feet and they'd stop. He says, I know you guys go out. And he says, that night he says, I'm going to see when we get back to Maui, did I get you the Silver Star? And he says, Duggar too. That's just what he told us. And then he says, you are going to Kentucky with me when we get the war over. And but it would have made a difference, I think. It would have made a difference. But I'm happy for the way it turned out, because I always look at it this way. I wouldn't have had my kids, probably, that I got now, and I know that when my boy ran the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, D.C., and he wanted me to go with him, I went with him, with my daughter and her kids and my son-in-law, and we're going to meet my son down there in Washington, D.C., that works for Turner Construction. He's been down there for 14 years, and he had his 5 kids with him. And we were going to go to the Jima Memorial, and my son that was running it said to my daughter, he says, Kim, says, when you get to the Iwo Jima Memorial, you watch Dad. I said, you keep an eye on Dad. And when she told me that, I said, what do you think I am, a kid? I said, hey, I know, nothing's going to bother me. So help me, I got over next to that Iwo Jima Memorial, and it just looked like the whole goddamn war was coming all over again. And I couldn't talk. I lost my voice. And I said, my daughter said, Dad, are you all right? Are you all right? And I says, no, I'm not all right. And I says, stay here. And to get away from her, I walked around the back of the monument and come out the front. And that's all I did. And that's what I said to her when I got out there. I was just barely able to talk. I says, I was so crazy on those goddamn battles. I took a lot of chances. And I says, what's making me lose it is that you people wouldn't have been born. If I got killed there, you kids wouldn't have been born. And that's what hit me the hardest.
Do you have any pictures of yourself while you were?
Yeah.
Wayne could focus on them.
I didn't know what you wanted. I called back, and that's a picture of my brother that was with me on the battles. That's my brother. And I got different ones here that I don't know what you want. This is.
Do you have any pictures of you in uniform?
I was in a jacket. I didn't have many taken when I was in a green uniform, so I brought. And I'll tell you something else that I did. That you won't believe. There's one with my sister to come to Washington D.C. where I was stationed. That's my sister, and there's another one like that. But
Okay.
And both of these are you?
Yeah. This is my company commander. These are my company commander and some of the guys that were in my platoon that were with me. That was our captain with his family. Here he is here again. That's the captain.
No, this is Ellis?
Yeah.
That you mentioned?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the guy that helped me out. Nobody else did. That's Vito Podesta and his wife from Hoboken, New Jersey.
Okay.
This is another one from Busey from Rome, New York. He's the one that was with us in L.A. and I told him to. Here's another one of three good guys. The middle one is Swartz. The guy on the end is Holly Waldron from Mechanicsville. He lives in Mechanicsville, and the other guy is from down in Beacon, New York. So
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
there was something else I wanted to say. Damn it, it slipped my mind now. Damn it. But,
Okay,
yeah.
well, thank you very much for your interview.